across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, welcome to the home of common sense. Thank you to Julia. She's back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Coming up on the programme today, the Tories can only beat Nigel Farage's reform by bringing back Boris Johnson, according to a new poll, as rumours swirl about a push to oust Kemi Badenoch. Serious question. Can Boris Johnson save the Tories? Would that make a blind bit of difference to you? We'll have more on that shortly. Also this afternoon, the government insists that British workers aren't being undercut by a new trade deal with India, despite claims Indian staff will pay less tax for the same jobs. This was an interesting deal that they've cut between the two countries. What does it mean in reality? We'll look at that story. And teenagers will be allowed to drive trains. Oh, man alive. As the minimum age is lowered from 20 to 18 to help tackle staff shortages behind most last-minute cancellations. There's one of the problems. It's a fairly well-paid job. I didn't realise there was a shortage of them. Do you want an 18-year-old driving your train? For some reason, it doesn't sound right to me. The average age, by the way, is currently 48 for a train driver in this country. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. So there's a lot to explore here this afternoon, but in particular, I think we'd be failing, given how much focus we have put on the recalibrating of our political system with the success of Reform UK, and even before last week, those obvious inroads, the way that Reform were not just eating into the Conservative Party, but also into the Labour Party. That was borne out last Thursday. So we're in, really genuinely fascinating times, given that in all of our lifetimes, we've only ever known the Tories and the Labour Party, and a little bit of a kind of a liberal component in different forms over the years thrown in for good measure. That's broadly been it, and it kind of, much like the States, I mean, people forget in America, you know, we hear about how many votes Trump got and how many votes the other girl, Harris, whatever her name was, she got. But there were other candidates, by the way. You don't hear about them. So, yes, it's definitely a change in terrain, and doubtless this is a change for good. It's permanent. So what do the Tories do? And that question we've explored many, many times from a whole host of different angles. Is it about policy? Is it about that? Sometimes it isn't really about anything. It's about a perception. And perceptions have a nasty habit of becoming reality. You can't turn them around. That once that's out there and you perceive something as done with, finished or dead, there's almost no return. Unless you listen to the results of this poll from the More in Common pollsters, who say the Conservatives can only defeat Nigel Farage's Reform UK if it finds a way to bring back Boris Johnson. Now, there's lots of rumours about whether Kemi Badenoch will stay, lots of rumours about whether Robert Jenrick would take over. What is interesting is that, according to the same poll, Mr Jenrick, remember he ran for leadership against Kemi, is even less popular with voters than she is, according to these numbers. So it's not looking good for either of them, frankly. But the only way they might be able to take on Big Nige is by getting him in. Is the big bumbling colossus that is Alexander Boris de Pfeffel Johnson, that upper-class purveyor of political optimism and sunny uplands, the wizard of the oven-ready deal, the Latin linguist, the smiling bloke next door? Well, aside from that, he's got a bigger house. The answer to the Tory woes, is he literally, seriously? Ordinarily, you might just look at this and go, well, I mean, in fairness, I don't think Mr Johnson himself has suggested this. What would you get if Boris Johnson ran the Conservative Party? What would be the obvious, bearing in mind this is a man that was kicked out by his own party. This is a man that is widely seen as not delivering the full Brexit deal that could have been delivered. This is a man that locked us down and was pretty evangelical about lockdowns, perhaps not as much as his the man that is now doing the job of Prime Minister, but nonetheless, he was up there with the rest of them, with the groupthink intelligentsia who were saying this is the only way to deal with it, and that's be in prison for about 3 years. So there's all of that going on. Then there's the Partygate stuff and trusting him, etc. And he was seen by many people who thought he really was the answer. I can remember doing phone-ins on Boris Johnson if I had even a tiny bit of criticism of Boris, even a little dinky bit of criticism of Boris Johnson, I would be shouted down by the big Bojo fans who would say, no, you can't say that about Boris, he's man of the people, he's the bloke that knows what he's doing. Now, of course, we almost have exactly the same situation with Nigel Farage. That's kind of worth pondering in itself. Almost 60% of Tory voters and half of those who back reform say that a Johnson comeback would be good for the party, as do a third of Labour backers as well. I mean, he'd certainly liven it up. There's no doubt about that. He was a good campaigner and he did spout optimism in a way that few politicians are able to do so. He made people feel good, and he had that cure despite being from the kind of background he's from. And similarly with Mr Farage, a great way to engage with ordinary working men and women. Could do that effortlessly, and I've seen it at first hand with both of those people. And yeah, he was good at that. But is he the answer? I mean, would you suddenly, if you've jumped from being a Tory to joining Reform UK, would you go back now and go, Boris is back? That's the answer to all of our problems. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Chloe Dobbs is with us, political commentator and all-round nice person. How are you, Chloe?
I'm good, thank you. How
good.
Are you?
Good. Nice to see you. Listen, I mean, look, we've sort of heard these kind of rumblings before, but here it is in a poll suggesting that the Tories can only beat Reform under Boris Johnson. Rumours of a plot to oust Kemi, though she's apparently more popular than Robert Jenrick, who lots of Conservatives wondered, could he be the answer to the problem? And of course, it's all compounded by the poor election results last week. Let's have a listen, though, to Boris Johnson during his election victory speech back in 2019. This seems like 100 years ago. Here it is.
And since I know that after 5 weeks, frankly, of electioneering, this country deserves a break from wrangling, a break from politics, and a permanent break from talking about Brexit. I want everyone to go about their Christmas preparations happy and secure in the knowledge that here in this People's Government, the work is now being stepped up to make 2020 a year of prosperity and growth and hope, and to deliver a Parliament that works for the people. Thank you all very much, and happy Christmas.
What's interesting about that is that we've had so many elections and so many leaders, of course, in the last 10 years. When was that election in 2019? Because he says Happy Christmas. Was it at like
it was a winter
November?
one. It was December time.
December.
Yeah. And well, he had.
Isn't it funny? I've no memory now.
I know it seems like a while ago, but they had that election in December to get the big majority that they would need to then get Brexit across the line. Because before that, they were facing all sorts of rebellions, people trying to put through emergency legislation and whatnot to stop Brexit from going through.
And that would have probably been the last enjoyable Christmas Boris Johnson had, because that must be a nice moment, going there over to Chequers with a big roaring fire, where Churchill and Thatcher and goodness knows who else sat in that impressive winged leather chair by an old study lamp and carpets that are worth more than most people's houses. Lovely opulence, great setting, only to throw it all away about 3 years later.
Yeah, and the following Christmas wouldn't have been quite as exciting because we in London were all chucked into that Tier 4 lockdown the following year.
Was that the Tier 4 one? Because I can never remember, because there were so many of those as well.
I know, it's hard to keep track of when those lockdowns
it's been all of that. Was he a Tier 4 or a Tier 2? You remember that conversation? Yeah. We're getting our results. It was like waiting for GCSE results.
I know.
What tier are you? 3, 4? Oh no, we're 4. No.
Oh, it's insane that we live through those times. But anyway, on the question of should Boris come back to the Conservative Party, I hope that he doesn't, because although it may boost the popularity of the Conservative Party a little bit, because he is a fantastic personality. He's great at winning votes. I doubt that he would put the Conservative Party in a position where reform then becomes redundant. We'll be back in the position we were in at the last general election, where a vote for reform was essentially just splitting the vote and was a vote for Labour. We're now, it seems like after the local elections, heading towards a position where a vote for reform is actually a vote for reform, and the Conservative Party is withering away and reform is coming out as the dominant party. And it's now a two-party system between, say, reform and Labour. I think that's a much better state of affairs than having Boris come back, the vote being split, and us ending up with Keir Starmer for another term. And also, although he's great on the campaign trail, he's got so much charisma, him being the face of the Brexit campaign definitely helped lead it to victory. We know from his time as Prime Minister that once you give him the keys to power, he can't actually deliver. He's just a chaotic mess. And immigration is the question that everyone wants an answer to at the moment, that people want action on. What happened with immigration under Boris Johnson?
Well, he's got a terrible track record. He's no better than Tony Blair.
He cannot be trusted to deal with that issue, and that is the one issue where if it doesn't get sorted, I mean, we are going to have an absolute crisis. And we saw, you know, the start of that crisis with the riots last year, because that was very much people feel, I don't agree with what they did, rioting, but you can see what happened. They felt like we've gone to the ballot box and peacefully said we want lower immigration, both legal and illegal, time and time again. Nobody's listening to us, so this is they felt like that was all they could resort to, and that's very sad that that happened. And you could see more of that happening if if they give, they hope Boris will turn it around somehow because they're wooed by his charm and charisma, and then they get disappointed again. The country will be infuriated. So this is a bad idea, if you ask me.
100%. But what's more likely to happen anyway is there's some kind of deal anyway between the Tories and Reform, so they wouldn't necessarily need a Boris Johnson, and they wouldn't have to worry about Kemi Badenoch not being as popular. She would become the Chancellor or something, and Farage would become the leader.
Potentially. I don't think you will see a pact happen between them until very, very close to the general election, and to the point where Reform has the upper hand in the negotiations because they're higher and keep moving higher and higher in the polls.
True.
And the reality is some sort of deal would be far more likely with someone like Kemi Badenoch. Could you imagine Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson, two big personalities that both want to be in charge, trying to negotiate? We've had Nigel talking about how he wouldn't trust Boris because of the reasons I've said, and he doesn't feel like Brexit was delivered properly under Boris. Nigel thinks that a lot of frustrations about immigration, so Nigel wouldn't trust him. I feel like they're two personalities that would both want to be in charge. Boris would not back down to Nigel's demands, so I think it would be a mess. It would be a mess.
If they did merge in some kind of way, as you rightly say, Chloe, obviously they are riding ahead in the polls and probably will be for some time. But of course, the treasure chest over there at Tory HQ is this 100 and so MPs that they've got, which could be the game changer. That's very tantalising to Reform to go, right, OK, they've already got 100 in the bag. So if we can get the rest.
Yeah, but then you look at all the polls that are coming out, and it's not just one poll, it's poll after poll after poll after poll, suggesting that Reform, they're on the trajectory to end up with potentially way more MPs than the Conservative Party at the next general election. So when Reform are negotiating, they're not going to be looking at it as we've got 5 MPs now and the Tories have over 100. They're going to be looking at, well, what's going to happen in the election. So I don't think that matters too much.
Let's move to this story. It's the other big one of the day. The Trade Secretary defending the India trade deal, calling it a smasher. Is that a phrase in itself? Do they use that in business meetings, in the boardroom? Don't hear Alan Sugar often referring to that. I think we've got a smasher on our hands. Anyway, that's exactly what's been said here, accusing Tories of criticism out of envy, despite concerns over tax breaks for Indian workers and firms. Let's have a listen to Keir Starmer speaking about the trade deal.
This is the biggest trade deal that we, the UK, have done since we left the EU, and it's the most ambitious trade deal that India has ever done, and this will be measured in billions of pounds into our economy and jobs across the whole of the United Kingdom. So it is a really important, significant day. And look, it's been promised many times over the last 8 years. Prime Minister Modi and I decided in Brazil last year that we would move at pace in relation to these negotiations. We've done that in a serious way, in a pragmatic way, and we're able to show that that's what delivers results.
Well, there it is. The biggest deal since Brexit, says Keir Starmer. But it's a little issue of national insurance that is bothering people.
Yeah, I think it is nice to see Keir Starmer working on trade deals that are outside of the EU, because one of the worries we have at the moment is if we don't get a good trade deal with the US, that we will be on the road to cozying up with the EU more and more and ending up back in the EU in all but name. So it's nice to see negotiations with somewhere outside of the EU, but the terms of this do not look great for Brits. And, you know, I said a moment ago that one of the biggest problem we face as a nation at the moment is the immigration problem, but that is part of a larger problem of Brits generally feeling like they are back of the queue, they are last priority when it comes to everything. And it seems like that may become the case in the job market if this deal goes through as planned, because what this means is it's going to be cheaper to hire Indian workers because they haven't got to pay national insurance. And I think a lot of British businesses that are on their knees just desperately trying to cope with rising energy bills, rising minimum wage, rising national insurance costs, you know, places like, you know, an independent British pub where most of the bartenders they're all on minimum wage, and this is having a huge hit, the minimum wage increase in national insurance costs. They're going to be absolutely furious when they see that an Indian business in the town with Indian workers is able to survive, but they've got to face potentially shutting down because they're not an Indian business and they don't have Indian workers. And you're going to see Brits getting infuriated when they're rejected for job applications, seeing that the candidate that is successful may have been chosen because it's cheaper to hire them because of this deal.
The interesting thing about this is the Tories had previously had this deal on the table. They turned it down specifically because of this. Labour said, well, you did one with Chile, which apparently is a bit similar to this, and there's several others around the world already. Message in from Michael McCarthy says, most news outlets are not pointing out that this national insurance thing only applies to Indian companies bringing employees over on a short-term basis, reciprocal with UK companies in India. It does not apply to Indian nationals applying for British jobs in Britain. They will still pay income tax and national insurance and accrue no benefits. They will continue to pay health surcharge and no visa route via the free trade arrangement. The UK has 16 similar agreements covering 50 countries. I wish people would stop trying to wind others up by missing the context.
Well, that is good extra context, but I think even if it is the case that Indian workers on this deal are just coming across short term, I feel like what this is doing is it's just putting a sticking plaster on a much deeper problem that we've got in this country, which is the fact that we've got loads of people out of the workforce, a lot of them struggling with mental health problems that are not being resolved by the NHS. We've got a horrendous productivity crisis in this country, and time again, solving that problem, because it's difficult, has been kicked down the road with immigration and deals like this being used as a quick solution to the problem. I don't think that we can. I don't think it's sustainable to keep going down that path forever.
We'll talk some more to Chloe in a couple of moments' time. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. Anything you've heard so far as well. Join us on 0344 499 1000. We're also exploring that question. Who'd have thought it? Can Boris Johnson save the Tories? If you are a Tory that legged it over to Reform, or even Labour that legged it over to Reform, would you go back again as a Tory to the Conservative Party if Boris Johnson was the leader again? Our lines are open. This is Talk.
In the view of India and Prime Minister Modi, just a few hours after signing that curious trade deal with Sir Keir Starmer, he launched this massive attack.
This is a revenge attack because they blame Pakistan.
They blame Pakistan, but in particular they blame the Pakistan intelligence services for nurturing and cherishing Islamist terrorists.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
What's great when we have guests come in to talk, we end up having random conversations during the break. And Chloe was just talking about the fact, Chloe Dobbs is with us, by the way, about running. You like running, and you've done a marathon, you did Paris.
Yeah, a few weeks ago.
You got a half. And I was making the point, I make this, a friend of mine does a lot of cycling. He's off to, where's he going? Somewhere in Spain. Tomorrow he's going for 3 days. He said it's going to be about 25 degrees. And I said, well, why would you ride a bike? Surely you'd wake up in the morning in your hotel in Spain and go, it's a lovely day, I'm going to lay by the pool. Why would you ride a bike?
Because you get so many endorphins when you exercise. It regulates your mood and everything. It makes you feel so much better. You feel like you've accomplished something.
I think, Chloe, I'm a medical curiosity. Because my friend down the road, she does a lot of running. I've never experienced this endorphin thing. Cycling, running, anything. Never. But the thing is,
when you start a sport, you will hate it for the first few weeks, and then your body gets used to it, and then you start to enjoy it. So you have to see it out. And also with anything, any skill, any sport, you have to. The better you get at it, the more you enjoy it.
I think I'm a medical curiosity.
If you try some skill that you're absolutely rubbish at first, you're going to hate it because it's frustrating and it's annoying.
Yeah, but look
then
at
when
me.
you get good,
I'm
you love
pretty
it.
tasty on the eye, Chloe. Come on, you don't look like this by doing nothing. Clearly, I do some stuff. When it comes to running, however, I just think, well, just jump in your car. You don't need to run.
Why?
Who are you running away from?
Why? I don't want to sit.
It's a metaphor
I don't
for
want
running
to sit
away.
in a stuffy car. That's not enjoyable.
I've got aircon. Well, not in my little blue car.
Get out and enjoy nature and.
You're probably
breathe
right.
in the air.
I've just never had the little endorphins. I know it's not.
Endorphins.
What about this one? Talking of transportation, the minimum age to drive a train is to be lowered to 18. I'd never even thought about what the age limit was for driving a train, and the UK is going to reduce this because they have a massive shortage of drivers.
I mean, sounds like a good idea if it's going to reduce the number of times that I get to a train station and hear, your train is cancelled. Not because of anything particularly major, but just because we don't have enough staff. So if that resolves that problem, then great. But I don't know exactly how difficult it is to drive a train, but I would imagine these days there's a lot of automation in the system and it's not too difficult. So
Can you read a book while you're driving the train? That's what I want to know.
I don't know.
And what do you do about going to the loo when you drive a train? If you're going, on a long distance?
I guess you have to have a backup person with you then, maybe.
Or a nappy. I don't know.
Or a nappy.
Maybe it's
Or you just wait until the end of the train's journey. But as long as it's not the case that these 18-year-olds are going to crash the trains because they're inexperienced. If they've been trained from age 16, and I am all for people leaving formal education and doing an apprenticeship instead if they're not academic. If that is going to work and the trains are going to turn up on time, then great. And I'm glad to see. I don't often praise this Labour government, but I'm glad to see something other than let's just nationalise it as a solution to the problem with the trains.
So a train driver can earn $69,000 on average, which is extraordinary money. That's twice the average wage. Starting at $30,000 with training lasting 1 to 2 years. At the moment, how many female train drivers do you think there are?
Not very many.
As a percentage, go on, have a go. Come on, sister.
I saw it in the I think it was 9% or
It is less, fewer than 9% are female and 12% ethnic minority drivers. So that's why they're putting a big call out. But when you
I do not think that is because of some sort of misogyny or something in the recruitment process. Like when I was growing up, the kids that were nerdy about trains, It was always boys. Jobs that are more hands-on and mechanical. I just think that the male brain craves that more than the female.
But do you know what?
And there will be some females that like it, clearly, something like 9% of them. But
100%.
I don't think that this is some sort of crisis. I think the reality is if they open this up to younger people, still the vast majority of applicants will be men, and I don't think that is a problem.
You know, when you get that kind of curious guest on Question Time who's some kind of sort of Marxist feminist character talking about inequality in the workplace, they always talk about the boardroom. I've never heard one of those women say we need more women tarmacking on the roads. I've never heard that said.
I don't want to tarmac the roads.
Correct. More bin men should be women. More people driving trucks. It's just is it just the big jobs that you want more women doing? It's just the ones that have a 16-figure salary.
Exactly. They only say it when it suits them. And the other thing is that they are never complaining about the jobs that are predominantly female, complaining about how us horrible women have left out all the men. So I think nursing, for example, is much more female.
Yeah, hoovering, there's another one.
Yeah, and they're not complaining about the fact that there aren't enough male cleaners and there aren't enough male nurses.
Correct.
We have biological nursing, for example. Women are very caring creatures. We like taking care of other people. We're more focused on that than being super competitive and making the top salary in the company that we work for. We've got less testosterone. We're going to be attracted to different jobs, and that is fine.
Yeah. Like working in kind of the beauty world, like, you know, nail bars or, you know, places where you get your facials. I mean, there are some blokes in there, but very few.
Yeah. And
very few gravitate to that kind of work.
Exactly. I go to the nail bar and I go get my Thai massage, and it's pretty much all ladies doing it.
Yeah, cash only.
Yeah.
Of course it is. I wonder what goes on there in those. But interesting, I'd love to know about I've never really thought about it. I don't think we've ever asked the life of a train driver, what it's like. Is it does it feel like a good job? Is it just literally looking out a window for 4 hours when you're on one of those long distance ones and nothing else? Can you sit down? Can you read a book? Do you get a break? Can you go to the loo?
Well, hopefully one of our viewers and listeners is a train driver and they can tell us.
Call us up if this is your world. 0344 499 1000. Would love to hear from you. And also this story as well, which is always a kind of depressing when we hear anything involving the death of a child, or certainly a missing child in this case. This is a Sun investigation set to be broadcast tonight will highlight the sick evidence found at the lair of Madeleine McCann suspect Christian Bruckner. He's a German guy. It's another sort of chapter, if you like, in this instalment of does this man know something? He's been a bit of a suspect. 1 minute we hear we haven't got enough evidence to charge him, and the next minute he seems to know something.
I mean, it was just crazy reading some of the revelations that have come about, and it will be really interesting to see this documentary coming out on Channel 4 that will reveal more details. I'm sure a lot of people will be interested in watching that, because this is a story that we have lived with for years. I mean, I remember growing up with this story as a kid, constantly hearing, really, and you know, it's very sad to hear in the evidence that it looks like the police have the photo evidence they need to suggest that Madeleine died very soon after she was captured, which I'm sure will be horrifying for the family. And you'll remember that we had all those years of people coming up with AI images of what she'd look like now, so we can try and spot her if we see her.
And then Oswald's around the world saying, I am Madeleine McCann, and things like this. There were a few of those cases.
It's crazy, but it sounds like this guy was absolutely mad and had all of these like kids' toys and swimsuits and prams, and he had this obsession with wanting to capture little kids. It's just very, very horrifying.
Let's have a listen. There's a little clip here. This is Rob Pattinson, who was one of the people that worked on this documentary, speaking on Talk this morning. Have a listen.
And I think we've always wondered, why do police suspect he is the man who kidnapped and murdered Madeleine McCann? Yeah. And we've been able to access police files which give us many of these answers. Right. So we can show pictures of him at key Maddie locations. Yeah. We can place him at the scene of an alleged confession. We've got stories where he describes his wish to abduct small children.
So there's a lot pointing at this man, but of course, you know, supposition and hearsay and suggestion, innuendo is not always enough to, you know, take the final point of charging someone.
Yeah, of course, we have to caveat all the discussion on this with the fact that we do not know yet if this is the guy that took Madeleine McCann. Of course, you know, I said the police have suspicion that she died shortly after she was captured, but we still don't know for sure. There is a chance that she could still be alive today somewhere, but it's going to be very interesting to see how this unfolds. And even if, you know, we do find out that this guy is guilty, as devastating as it will be, at least will provide some closure for both the family and all of the members of the public who, as I say, have been interested in this story and wondering what on earth is going on for so many years.
Indeed. We hit the clock there, Chloe. It's been great to see you. And by the way, listen to this, oh cynical one. Kenny in Edinburgh, you are indeed easy on the eye, Ian, because I made that point a little earlier. My 82-year-old mum properly fancies you. You see, that's what happens. When you get to middle age as a bloke, I have this in the supermarket every now and again, somebody who is, you know, fairly attractive comes up to you and goes, "You're Ian Collins, aren't you? You know, what you know, from the telly and the radio." You go, "Yeah, my mum really likes you." Okay.
You love it, really.
I love it, really. Anyway, you better get your running shoes on. You've got a train to catch.
I guess so.
I guess so. That's Chloe Dobbs with us here on Talk. Lots more coming from you as well. 0344 499 1000. That is where you'll find us. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Is Boris Johnson the answer to the Tory party woes? Dan in Gloucester says, Boris returning as PM, I think he is too divisive to be accepted back, given his track record over COVID lockdowns and his lack of grip on the Tory party. Let's not look back. We need to look forward to a new leader and a different politics in the UK. I lent my vote to Reform last summer, but they are yet to convince me they are a serious proposition for the country, but time will tell, which is a completely reasonable, in fact, that should be anybody's disposition really, shouldn't it, on new parties or politicians in general. We asked the question yesterday, what have Reform got to do to prove they are worthy of your vote? And I don't think those that run Reform would argue against people pondering that question. On the issue of the trade deal, the government saying British workers won't be undercut by a new trade deal with India. This comes in from Will, who says this is a good deal for Britain. From what I've seen, there doesn't seem to be much by the way of extending the number of visas given, one of India's main sticking points, and the national insurance decision makes sense. It emulates what we already have with many other countries. I believe it's the A1 form with much of Europe, where an immigrant pays social security to their home country, like France, not to the country they are residing in. And India is only going to grow, so being the first to get them to move even a bit from their protectionist instincts is good and puts us in a good position with them, which is what we want if projections are true that they will become the world's third largest economy over the next few decades. Will says, gritting his teeth, well done, Keir Starmer. This was a deal the Tories originally kind of had on the table, but turned it down, I understand, based specifically on this problem. Opposition parties have warned Indian staff could end up paying far less for the could end up paying less tax for the same jobs, thanks to this exemption in national insurance. Labour's Jonathan Reynolds called it a smasher of a deal and says similar agreements are already in place with over 50 other countries. Joining me to discuss this, we have Mandira Kapoor-Smith, businesswoman and entrepreneur, and Aman Bogle, founding chairman of Global Britain UK. Good afternoon to you both. Mandira, firstly, you heard our last communicator saying this is a great deal all round and, you know, what's not to like? It's reciprocal, it's got all the ingredients, India's growing like mad, so, you know, let's get in there first and be up close and personal with what's going to become the world's third largest economy. What's not to like?
I think the thing is, this is a great deal for India. It's not a great deal for this country. India is going to become a huge economy, but why aren't we looking at the UK becoming a huge economy? We should be looking at India to set up skill centers here, teaching the British people how to improve our skills here to be able to do the same jobs. Why are we getting people in from India? Yes, come in for 6 months, teach the British. We're supposed to, when I came from India, I set up a company here. My brief was I had to create jobs. I did that. But the point is I paid all the insurance. I did everything that needed to be done. Why now have I missed out on that? Am I getting paid back for the money I've spent, the employees I've employed? The point is we have to create jobs in this country to grow the economy here, not the GDP. Putting money in people's pockets, exactly what this government goes on about, but it's still not doing.
What was because apparently this was kind of number one on Modi's list when he was sort of putting down the bullet points, you know, we want this, and then obviously the UK said we want this and we want this. But right at the top of this list was this national insurance exemption. Do you know what the kind of why that would have been given such priority? I mean, obviously it means that you're not paying extra tax.
Why did the last party sign the deal? Because of this.
Yeah.
Because they knew what the effect will be on the economy. The point is you've got the economy, you're supposed to grow jobs here, not bring people in to do the jobs. So I don't understand. NHS is going to go, everything's going to go.
Okay. Aman, come in and respond to some of that, because I know you're very much in favour of this deal.
Indeed. Well, look, this is a great Brexit dividend for the UK. It all started off under Prime Minister Boris Johnson, under the UK-India Roadmap 2030. Look, the fact of the matter is that Indian companies already are the second biggest generator of jobs in the UK. So, you know, I, with all respect to the other guest, I think it's a load of codswallop that we just heard. It's one of our biggest inward investors already. Some of our biggest companies are supported, funded, and invested into by big Indian companies. Look at Jaguar Land Rover, look at Tetley. They are the biggest private sector employers in the UK. But all that aside, what this deal does is it opens up the world's fourth biggest billion consumer market for the United Kingdom and our businesses to have free access to such a huge market. But more than that even, it also means that we start moving our supply chains away from the Chinese communists and their control, and look at what Apple's doing. It shifted a lot of its iPhone manufacturing to India.
Sorry to interject, Aman, but can't you do all of that anyway? As Mandira was just saying, could you not do that anyway without having to have this kind of curious national insurance exemption?
I'm someone who brought my business in, so you're talking to someone who's done it. And no, it doesn't work. It's
yes,
not that,
and you're
not that simple.
And you're a great example.
Person who's done it.
Yes, and you're a great example of bringing in Indian investment into the UK. So I don't understand why you would be against.
The thing is, why didn't I have the ease of bringing in my entire team who knew my product? Instead, I had to create jobs.
So you should be.
Why can't I teach them the skills? No.
Well, nobody is stopping the 9.4 million economically inactive people in the UK from getting up and doing a job. And that's exactly what the government should be doing.
Well, you are if you're getting cheaper labor in instead of teaching
skills. It's not getting cheaper labor. Look, I don't think you understand.
Let's not fool ourselves.
Let me finish,
cheaper
please.
Labor.
It's not cheaper labor, because let me explain to you. The way the National Insurance Contribution exemption works, and it works already for multiple other countries, for 54 other countries who have similar deals with the UK on national insurance contributions. Any Indian company transferring an Indian employee temporarily to the UK will be still paying the national insurance contributions of 24% to the Indian NICs, which is the Indian Provident Fund. So it's not going to be cheaper all of a sudden for an Indian company to bring in a temporary Indian worker. So it's not.
I didn't tell you this, that I think this has thrown light to a lot of the other countries which we people didn't know about that have this deal. Number one.
Well,
number two.
Okay. So tell me one thing, please.
I wasn't told about
how would it be? How would it be?
I wasn't told about the 20% national insurance when I came here. I paid everything as I had to.
Yes, and that's the big benefit of this trade deal. That if you bring in, yes, but you didn't come over as a temporary Indian worker. You came here to invest money into the UK.
I brought people in as temporary Indian workers. I did bring people in. I wasn't given no deal.
Yes, and that's because we didn't have a free trade agreement with India at the time you came in. This is for temporary intra-company workers.
For 3 years, it's not temporary. For 3 years,
it's temporary because already for any country,
it's setting up an entire business. Who knows what happens?
It's not. No, it's not. Right now, any country.
What happens to the British citizens? In 3 years, they're out of work. They have no money. They have nothing. They've gone. So this country is full of Indians.
No, it is not.
Who are coming into work. What is happening to the citizens of the country? I moved here because of the economy. The economy
it sounds to me that you have a personal issue with why you weren't able to get this exemption before this FTA
it's not a personal issue. It's not a personal. It's the fact that I moved here and I want an economy here.
Let me ask you, where do you manufacture your products? Where do you manufacture your products? Where do you manufacture your products?
I manufacture in India. I came to trade here. But
right, there you go. So you manufacture in India.
Jobs here.
Why don't you bring those manufacturing jobs there?
Mr. Bogle, I think once we'll sit down and talk.
It's a simple question, madam. Why don't you bring the manufacturing jobs there with you?
The point is, what I'm trying to make is, had I been able to set up schools here and teach people here what I do, that would benefit not only the country, but me as well as a business. Number one. Number two, I need the economy of this country to grow because I've moved here. I don't want to be sitting
the way it's going to be
over. I mean, look at India. It's all beneficial for India. It doesn't benefit the country.
On the contrary, the biggest uptick in this FTA deal is going to be of UK exports to India. So things we manufacture in the UK, it is expected to grow by £25 billion.
And what else? How is it putting money in people's pocket?
Because those things are manufactured by British businesses, madam, by British workers.
But they already, listen, people are not employing more people because of the national insurance. Now you're saying you're getting labor in from India for setting up a company.
That's got nothing to do with this trade deal, madam. Free trade brings an opportunity.
It doesn't make sense.
I think, madam, you need to go back to MBA school. Seriously.
Aman, can I just ask you a question? Isn't one of the manifestations of this, which I think Mandira was alluding to also, is that if you have the Bogle Food Foundation Corporation on a retail park somewhere, and you have the Mick Jones Food Corporation over there, the workers in one factory are going to be earning more than the workers in the other one, right?
No,
because of the national insurance.
No, they're not. You see, this is the red herring. Any worker. No, even the companies aren't, because the company, if it is an Indian company bringing in an Indian worker on a temporary visa, they will still have to pay 12% NICs to the Indian Provident Fund, as with that temporary Indian worker paying their 12% of NICs into their Indian Provident Fund. Answer me this question. If you are not going to be claiming a state pension for the UK, how is it fair to then pay into that system? Look, let's not forget.
National insurance is not the pension. National insurance
is. You have to. Yes, it is. You have to.
You're now going to have more housing for people.
No,
you're going to have less housing for the UK citizens.
Well, first of all,
this
trade deal,
it doesn't work.
Yes, those are domestic issues that have to be dealt with. This trade deal does not
all that's going to happen is the British are going to start
any more numbers
as well, and we're done. Let me put it that way.
This trade deal does not affect any immigration numbers. There is no.
It does. It
not
does.
a part of it. No,
it does.
Okay,
if I'm setting up and bringing in people for 3 years to do the work that British people should be doing.
How is it?
All right, Aman, final
skill center and training these people.
Final word, Aman, on this.
Look, I think a lot of people are kicking up a lot of hysteria. You go and read the details, as good people like Daniel Hallam, Jacob Rees-Mogg have done. The real detail is that, look, this does not undercut British workers because the costs of employing a temporary Indian worker will be the same as employing a British worker.
All right.
The only thing is they'll still be paying the NHS surcharge, they'll still be paying income tax. It's that they're not here to pay NICs, but they're still paying it in otherwise.
So there are other costs involved. Listen, I have to stop there, guys, because we hit the clock. It's been great and very informative and on occasions quite entertaining to hear two very different views from an Indian perspective. Mandira Kapoor-Smith, businesswoman and entrepreneur, very much against this national insurance issue. The other voice you heard there was Mr. Bogle, Aman Bogle, founding chairman of Global Britain UK. You decide. 0344 499 1000.
Unfair, but not as well as British citizens. They should have to be able to provide proof of medical insurance. But what they shouldn't be is less expensive to hire than the native population. And under these rules, essentially, it's going to be 20% cheaper for an employer to employ an Indian worker than a Brit. How on earth is that supposed to benefit our society when we've got worklessness that is currently off the charts, particularly in the lower paid sectors, particularly among 18 to 25-year-olds?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This comes from Mark, who says, that lady sounds bitter. We had Brexit, but there was no trade deal when she arrived. But here, but she still stayed. The deal is fine. Stop bashing Labour. Yes, the Tories started the talks and Labour finished them. You go on about Brexit benefits. Well, here's one, unless you're Farage or Kemi. But yeah, it might well be a benefit. I'm not arguing it's not. I think the issue around this is specifically on national insurance. And the previous talker that you allude to, Mark, I think she came here many years ago, way before Brexit, to set up a company and a deal. And she feels it's unfair on British workers and doesn't take advantage of British labour rather than importing Indian labour, which was her point. John's in Woking. Back to Boris Johnson. John, what have you got for us? Hi.
Boris Johnson is a four-letter word.
B-O-R-I-S. I think it's 5, actually, but yeah, I take your point.
No.
No, I know.
He's a liar. You know, no, just, yeah, he can come back. They'll have, what, 6 seats, 5, 6 seats at the next election? Good luck to them. Mate, I started voting Tory in days of Maggie Thatcher. I wouldn't vote now for a team China.
Say that again. You wouldn't trust?
I wouldn't. I've supported the Tory party since the days of Maggie Thatcher.
Yeah, but you wouldn't go back?
Oh, no chance.
Yeah.
Not a chance. They lied to us.
What was the biggest area that you felt let down by the
immigration?
Tories? Immigration. Yeah.
I mean, Cameron said, tens of thousands. It's a lie.
Yeah.
They lied. They want cheap. They want cheap workers. And that's why we got out of the EU, wasn't it?
So it's about cheap workers. That's essentially what it is. Because you know, if you bring somebody in, you've got to pay them the same wage.
Well, you know, I understand the birth rate, you know, is falling and all that, and I think that's what a lot of it's about.
Apparently, yeah. We hear that, don't we? That's one of the reasons. Or is it because, you know, the other reason we hear is that Brits won't do certain jobs?
I don't believe that.
The care sector being an obvious one, you know, old folks' homes, that kind of thing.
I think Farage has got it right. He wants to raise the threshold to 20%. I'd even go slightly higher. That's what's going to get people back to work. Mm. It is, because the more money in your pocket. I mean, is it 16 hours and then they stop work, don't they? Because it doesn't work. Well, the tax threshold is much higher. You know, take me out of tax, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, well, yeah. Not just me, the whole family. I love it. Listen, John, thank you very much indeed for that. Lots of comments coming through. We also talk about, apparently there's a massive shortage of train drivers. Oh, I did have this in from Josh, who says, I've been looking for a career as a train driver. I can't find any company looking for drivers. Chris is in Nottingham. You are a train driver, Chris, is that right?
No, I've retired, but I did 30 years.
You did 30 years on the rails, and now you're off the rails, as it were.
That's it. Yeah, three different depots, over a million miles. Yeah.
Good work. Is it a good job?
Yeah, it's a very good job. It's very good. Freight is different to passenger, very different lifestyle.
Yeah.
But I chose freight when it was privatised, on the basis that boxes don't shout at you. Yeah. And yeah, you know, it's a wonderful career, and I got to drive 21 different trains during my career.
Nice. So when you're when you're on a passenger train, for example, I'm assuming you've done that as well at some point, Chris?
No, London to Newcastle, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what do you do when you're... I know that sounds like a strange question. Can you do anything when you're sat there on the train driving it to Newcastle? Obviously, you might have to stop at, you know, depending on the route, but 4 or 5 stations, say, on a fast one. Can you read a book? Can you look away?
You're not allowed anything at all. No mobile phones, nothing. You have to have 100% concentration on the job, because anything can happen at any moment.
Yeah, fair point. Well, that's reassuring to hear. But I guess that's part of the skill almost, is having the right mindset that would give you that level of patience to endure that. And there is something about focusing for long periods that requires a certain kind of person, because not everybody could do it.
That's right. Before I leave you to the next caller, let me just give you the scenario I give everybody, including my doctor, that said to me, he's a very clever guy, but he said, what could be easier? Well, I will tell you, you're the driver of a 125-mile-an-hour train.
Yep.
And you know you've got to stop at Newark. So you know that when you go past the factory on the right, or you go under that bridge or whatever, or you see a landmark, you know this is the place I'm going to brake so that I can stop at Newark.
Sure.
Right. Today it's thick fog and you can't see 6 foot in front of you. Where are you going to brake?
Good point. Where are you going to brake?
It's a tough old job, I tell you. It can be.
Yeah, I bet it is. Are you surprised to hear there's apparently a shortage?
I'm astonished because I retired just before the money went up, unfortunately. I was always, put it this way, when I first got a train driver's job, I was earning the same as a postman. And I'm not putting postman down, but I was paid the same as a postman.
Would you recommend it still?
I absolutely would. When I look around at what people are expected to do now for how much, I would say if you've got the will to do it, put your mind to it, pass the test and do it. Absolutely.
Yeah. How do you stop in fog? Or how do you know where to stop?
You eventually learn to, you hear bridges, you know certain things from sound, all sorts of things that give you an idea of where you are. Yeah. On the continent, I was lucky enough to drive the TGV with authority from the French, from the SNCF. And even 10 years ago, they could see 10 kilometres of signals ahead of them where we're peering into the gloom to see the next yellow light or whatever.
Blimey.
But even 10 years ago, they could look down and say, oh, yeah, the line's clear for the next 10 kilometres. And that's what we're getting now. We're going to get in-cab signalling.
Got it.
And that, again, will push everything forward again, yeah.
Well, you'd hope so. Listen, Chris, great call. Thank you very much indeed for that. The life of the train driver. I don't think we've ever discussed that before, but apparently they're looking for more of them. There's going to be a chronic shortage. The average age of a train driver is 48. They haven't got enough women doing the job, less than 9% so far. And the money is pretty darn good. When you get to experience level, could be up to north end of 70,000 a year. Why are people not applying? Although, as we said from Josh, he's looked around, can't find a single vacancy. More from you on the way, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk, and we're back with more. Kevin Schofield with us too after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And yes, good afternoon. Welcome back. Lots to get through. We are talking, of course, the Tories. Apparently the Tories can only beat Nigel Farage's Reform UK by bringing back Boris Johnson. Serious question. Can Boris Johnson save the Tories? It seems a bonkers way to frame this at the moment, but that's according to a new poll. Of course, there are rumours that Kemi Badenoch is up for the push, although senior Tories, Ian Duncan Smith and the like, are saying, no, we're not doing anything like that. They always say that, don't they? Also this afternoon, the government insists British workers are not being undercut by a new trade deal with India, despite claims Indian staff will pay less tax for the same jobs. Who's right on this one? Does it all come out in the wash? There's a bit of mischief and a few nuances missing in this discussion. We'll explore that in more detail too. And police were slow to tackle misinformation that fueled the Southport riots, according to a new report, with forces urged to work more openly with the media and crack down on fake news online. Well, good luck with that in the 21st century. Thank you very much indeed for all your calls and comments coming through at the moment. 0344 499 1000. This one in from Glenn. It says, the only thing Boris Johnson has in his favour is his character. His policies were weak, wet and liberal. Once he lost Dom Cummings, who was the real organ grinder, he went to pieces. He had no authority in the party and his policies were the total opposite to the ones that gave him an 80-seat majority. Boris would not be a game changer for the Tories, but I tell you what would be some policies people actually agree with. Why do the Tories think so many of their old supporters are turning to reform and they still can't see it? Unbelievable. Boris isn't the answer. He was the problem, says Glenn, man about town. Speaking of man about town... oh, no, sorry, I lie. It's Kevin Schofield. Hey, see what I did there, Kevin? Beautiful. Political editor at HuffPost UK, hot-footing it from PMQs over there in Parliament. How was it today, Kevin?
I mean, it was in terms of performance, Kemi Badenoch was good again. She's definitely found her stride, I think, in recent weeks when it comes to PMQs. Again, no knockout blows, but she certainly didn't allow Keir Starmer to make the run. I think she won, basically. He seemed pretty nervous. He was reading all his answers off a piece of paper. Nothing appeared to be, ad-libbed. It was pretty unimpressive from him, actually, I thought. But yeah, she was good. She asked about winter fuel, which again, big issue. Lots of Labour MPs very unhappy about it on the back of the local elections last week. Speak to any Labour MP, they'll tell you, doorstep after doorstep, that's all people bring up again and again and again is the winter fuel payment decision. So she's right to go on that, I think. She also had to go at him over net zero as well, saying that's what's pushing up bills. So she tried to sort of tie them both together, winter fuel and net zero, and it was pretty effective, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, that is the thing, isn't it? With you've done this for years, Kevin. You know that perception can become a reality. I mean, Starmer can sit there talking about how most pensioners are not affected by this and blah blah blah. He can have all these stats he wants, but the perception now is that the Labour Party took winter fuel allowance away from old people. That's it. It's as simple as that.
That's it. It's not a case of, well, it's actually means tested, so really rich people who didn't need it, they're not getting it anymore. Well, that's true, but also because of the way they did it, basically lots of poor pensioners have had it taken off them as well, relatively poor. And if you earn more than I earn, if you receive more than 11,500,
that's a crazy. Who drew the line there? Why?
I think that was just because it was the easiest way to do it in terms of the tax system. But politically, it's just toxic.
Oh, because of the 12 grand thing and all that business.
Absolutely,
something on that. But I mean, if they'd have said. Because I think we all agree that if you're a multi-millionaire, you probably shouldn't get the fuel allowance. If you earn 50k a year, you probably shouldn't get the fuel allowance. But, if you'd put the line at sort of 20, that would have been a bit more palatable and understandable.
Yeah, it would have been. But for whatever reason, they didn't do that. Now, there have been discussions in number 10 about how they can ameliorate it a little bit, make it a little bit softer. But they've decided, number 10, Keir Starmer, they've decided to say, no, we're not touching it. It is what it is. And, to hell with the political consequences. But, they're paying a very heavy price. Another poll out this morning from YouGov, Reform are on 29%. I think Labour on 22, the Tories on 17. I mean, just astonishing, really, almost in fourth place, just ahead of the Lib Dems. So Labour are suffering as a result. We saw that at the local elections last week. So I think Kemi Badenoch was quite right to attack him on it.
It's interesting, this kind of Indian deal with the tax thing. What I find most sort of slightly journalistically interesting about this is the fact that this kind of two-tier Keir, which unfortunately for Keir, two-tier rhymes with Keir, but in the same way that Snatcher rhymed with Thatcher, you know, it's a bit of that going on. And this has lent itself beautifully. So it's two-tier tax Keir now, or tax tier 2 Keir, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
That's, again, it's the headline on this one. He says it's a great deal. There's other countries that have a similar arrangement.
Yeah.
The Tories did consider this deal, but apparently refused it on this specific issue.
So they say. That's what Kemi Badenoch's spokesperson was saying after.
She was
PMQs.
business secretary, of course.
She was business secretary, and they say that, you know, obviously they were trying to get, right back to when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, they were trying to get this trade deal over the line. So the line coming from the Tories is that this was basically the hill that they chose to die on this one. They were not going to countenance this national insurance arrangement whereby Indian workers coming here don't have to pay it. But it also means that British workers going to India don't have to pay it either, the social security element over there. So they say that's why we didn't do it, but Labour have caved. That's their line on it. We'll see how long that line holds. As you said earlier, there is nuance to this as well. Basically what Labour are saying is, well, look, we have got to look at these trade deals in the round. Yes, we're having to give a little on the national insurance side for Indian workers, but tariffs on Scotch whisky massively reduced. Tariffs on other British goods in India are being slashed, so we'll be selling more to India, which will be much better for the economy. But politically, again, you know, you tell people this means it's going to be cheaper to hire foreign workers rather than British workers, which technically is just about true. And it's a politically toxic.
Well, we just had two Indian voices on, two business people from the world of business, one for, one against, and they had a bit of a row about exactly this. He was saying, the one who's for it, because I said, look, if you've got the Indian company over there and the British company over there, they're doing the same jobs, then the Indian guys are going to be earning slightly more because not paying national insurance. And he said, actually, no, because they have to pay. There's some kind of sort of Indian fund or something they
pay it in India.
They have to give to. So they'll be doing that. So they won't come out any differently out of this.
Yeah, so listen, it's to stop double taxation, basically, so you're not having to pay into the social security.
This is the non-dom argument.
Well,
in a way,
exactly.
isn't it? It's a similar
It's
mechanics.
very similar. So you're not paying it in the country where you're working, as well as back home. So that's mean you're only paying it once. So a British worker only pays it in India. An Indian worker, so a British worker pays it in Britain. Indian worker pays it in India rather than where they're working, i.e. here. But what's interesting about it is you've got people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, Daniel Hannan, Steve Baker. You know, these pretty right-wing Tories all saying this is a great deal, and why on earth is the Tory party kicking off about it? And I think the reason for that is they're terrified of reform. They see that this is politically an open goal for reform, because as Nigel Farage has done, he said this is, you know, cheaper migrant labour at the expense of British workers. So the Tories have kind of got to be on that pitch as well.
Yeah, of course.
Even though, you know, they're supposed to be in favour of free trade as Conservatives.
Well, and they don't want to be seen to be. It's sort of, again, the optics, isn't it? To be seen to be in the wrong place, even if it's not really in the wrong place, and it looks like Reform are speaking on behalf of British workers, and yet again the Tories aren't.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. Because I was looking at, you know, Steve Baker, etc., Daniel Hannan, giving very lucid explanations as to why this is a good thing and this row over national insurance is actually irrelevant. But the replies on social media were all about, this is why the Tories are nowhere anymore, you're a disgrace, and you just think this is where we are now politically. So that is, I think, explains why Kemi Badenoch, Robert Jenrick, Mel Stride, all these people are basically chasing reform on this one.
So, but it means sometimes they might have to argue stuff that, well, I mean, some would say that aren't things that aren't actually true, or at least things that are bereft of full context.
Yeah, they sail very close to the wind. I mean, I think a lot of the problem actually is social media, because you've only got a limited amount of characters, and you've got to get your point across really quickly. So you get a trade deal that's probably like that thick, and you have to boil it down to like 100 words on X, and you're obviously you're going to miss detail, you're going to miss nuance.
Of course you are.
You're not getting the full picture, but as I say, social media doesn't lend itself to balance or
Well, do you know what? I was
debate.
thinking about this. I was out walking the dog this morning. I don't know why this went through my mind again, but years ago, I've got a PhD, by the way, in coming up with great ideas for books and then doing sod all about it, only for someone else to do it years later. We've all been there a
That's
little bit.
annoying. That's annoying.
So I had this idea. It was called Men Who Lie, and this is about a decade ago, maybe a little more. And it was really based on seeing people say stuff on social media that was so obviously not true, and so easy to find out that it wasn't true. But they, by that stage, 20 million people had seen the tweet. They sent it off around the world. The truth is, always behind the lie, etc. But I wouldn't say it was rare even back then, but it was a lot rarer.
Yes.
And I know people like, John Ronson and others had sort of written books about the sort of way the digital world and social media was, changing things, and mischief, the den of iniquity that was Twitter and Facebook, etc. But I couldn't really write that book now because wherever you look, it's full of lies.
Absolutely. Well, President Trump is no stranger to telling lies. You could say one thing one day and one thing the next, and his supporters will
agree on both. Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, the tariff thing is utterly bonkers.
Well, totally.
Yeah, even hard right Republicans are saying it's bonkers.
Yeah, totally.
But if it came from the hero, then
absolutely.
Sort of say
people like Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, all these guys, set out time and again why tariffs and protectionism is a bad thing.
Sure.
But now all these Republicans are supportive of it. Not Bush, to be fair, but a lot of Republicans are supportive of it because it's been said by Donald Trump. That's just kind of where we've ended up.
And I can't write my book now because imagine going to a publisher and I've come with this great idea. It's a book of people who say inaccurate things on social media. They're going to go look at me like, well, and what? That's what social media is. And yet I still see, it's usually in reply to sort of Elon Musk or something, where somebody goes, we are the news now. It's, Bob in Wyoming, who's sort of, who's a mechanic, and I'm sure a great mechanic, who's claiming that he is the Oracle of Delphi. He is the bastion of truth. And invariably doing the very things that he accuses the so-called legacy media of.
Well, totally, it drives me mad when you say, well, this is why the MSM is dying,
Yeah, what you're doing here is far worse than anything you're accusing the MSM of.
Good luck making that argument on social media.
Yeah.
You wouldn't last long.
No, but it's vaguely amusing to watch sometimes. But it's also infuriating.
It is infuriating. It drives me bonkers, really.
Yeah. And I, every now and again I'll send a tweet back to somebody saying, mate, just Google that. Or just search that out. You will find really quickly that that is not true.
Yeah.
There's literally no truth in that at all.
You as well just shouting.
But you just retweet, somebody else says something, and then you retweet it and go, look, have you not seen this? It's terrible.
And as you say, it allows misinformation to spread by its very nature.
Yeah.
All it needs to be is retweeted by Elon Musk, and that's it.
Yeah.
It's effectively true.
Yeah.
I mean, Elon Musk is one of the worst. The stuff that he says, interesting. He's not saying it's true.
Yeah, no,
he
does right. He's interesting.
Sharing it.
And then it's a kind of a tweet by Alex Jones or something. I don't mean the girl from the One Show. I mean the fellow with the tinfoil hat.
Yeah,
him.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's everywhere, and it becomes established fact.
But all of that could go under a Boris Johnson government, of course, because that's the way this is all going to be solved. Boris Johnson comes back. A new poll says it could be the only way to defeat Nigel Farage. I don't imagine. I can't see that in a million years, by the way.
No.
Even if not that, firstly, he wouldn't come back. But if he did come back, I don't think he'd beat Nigel Farage.
Well, it's one of those great what-ifs, isn't it? It's very difficult. This was a poll asking people, if there was an alternative leader with the Conservative Party, would you vote for them rather than Reform?
Yes.
What was interesting, probably more interesting, was that Robert Jenrick does no better than Kemi Badenoch.
Yes.
They're both beaten.
In fact, slightly worse, I think.
It's slightly worse, correct. So they're both beaten comfortably by Reform. And Conte says Boris would just about beat Reform. But again, it's a hypothetical. It will probably never happen.
Yeah.
But just think about it. If Boris Johnson did want to do it, one of the things he'd need to do is find a seat. Obviously, he'd need to become an MP. And where right now, looking at where the Tories are in the polls, where could you put up Boris Johnson in a safe Tory seat? Does such a seat exist?
Does it? Does
it would become
exist?
such a target. Nigel Farage would be down there every single day saying, Boris is the guy that opened the floodgates to all these immigrants, because net migration soared under Boris Johnson after the pandemic and after Brexit. I think it really difficult. As much as he does have an ability to cut through in a way that other politicians don't, I think it'd be difficult and a real gamble for him to stand somewhere and run the risk of losing.
Indeed. I was just looking at some of the comments about Boris Johnson on social media, and I literally can't read any of them out.
Yeah.
They're not kind.
It is amazing, really. You think, 2019, the guy was like the most popular politician in the country.
Indeed.
Wins a big majority. I think Partygate, people still think about Partygate. I think that's a black mark clearly against them, plus the immigration stuff.
It's another one of those. I imagine if you went to the pub with Boris Johnson, he'll probably say, I literally walked in to one event at that time when somebody was leaving.
Yeah.
I never went to a party, and I believe it, by the way. But the perception is they were partying like it was, 1999.
Yeah, well, exactly. The thing he got fined for was ridiculous.
That was the most ridiculous.
That was when he was ambushed by the cake.
How can you get fined for turning up at your own surprise birthday?
Yeah, he wasn't even,
there was only 3 of them in there. One of them was Rishi. He got a fine as well for that.
When you see the picture, it was the worst party ever.
It's awful. Colin the Caterpillar cake. Colin the Caterpillar didn't get fined at all, apparently. Lady Anne says Suella cancelled the Indian deal because it discriminated against the British workers. I'm not sure she would have cancelled it, would she? Wouldn't have had the authority to cancel it as Home Secretary.
No, definitely not. Although, again...
She would have had a say on the workers issue or migration.
I'm sure she would have had input, and would have probably spoken against
But Kemi was the business secretary.
Kemi was the business secretary, so she would have been sort of holding the pen as it is.
Or ultimately the Prime Minister.
Ultimately, but on her recommendations.
Indeed.
So if she says no, then it's difficult to overrule her.
Final one here, Kevin. Nigel Farage has stated Reform UK councillors will reject diversity and climate change training, citing equality as their reasoning. What I like, I don't know where to start with this story. The idea that you have climate change training is, that does sound a little bit statist, doesn't it? You will be trained to believe this way.
Yeah, it is a bit of an odd one. I think I'm trained in what?
What are you trained in? Do you have to go to university for that?
Climate change is one of those things that you're entitled to an opinion.
Yes.
That is your opinion. You can have a personal opinion. Yeah, it does seem a little bit sinister.
And diversity training, again, what do you have to be trained in? Having a different opinion?
I guess presumably being mindful of your co-workers or,
But isn't that just something that most people do instinctively? There's obviously been a few characters around the block over the years who haven't been like that. Nobody disputes that.
Yeah.
I don't think you'd ever.
And you don't get away with
it now.
You would never get away with it now.
No, of course you
people know that.
But when somebody comes along and says, you need to be trained on this, we need to get the critical race theory people in on the case.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? This is Nigel Farage. They've just had this big victory. They're getting their feet under the desk in all these councils, and this is again, it's almost like he's still campaigning.
Yeah.
Still campaigning. It's like, look at this woke nonsense. We'll stop it, and it's just all apart, I think, with the vision towards 2029, the next general election, and we'll just see this again and again.
It's going to be interesting how it pans out. We were hoping to speak to one of the councillors in Kent, and we may do over the coming days. Maxine Fothergill, who I think is standing to be leader of the council, and Kent County Council is one of the, I think I'm right in saying, it's the biggest. Kent County Council, the largest in the country, with a $2 billion budget, more than 9,000 employees, and 787 million in debt.
Wow.
Now that's the kind of challenge that these guys are now going to face. It's all very well electioneering going, we're going to take this over.
Yeah.
And good luck to whoever does.
Absolutely.
But that's what you've got to solve.
Absolutely. And, good luck getting rid of that with, getting rid of a few ergonomic chairs or sacking 1 or 2 DEI hires.
It's not going to touch the sides, is it?
It's not even going to come close.
Yeah. Apparently, the last DEI hire, somebody told me at Kent County Council, was on $48,000 a year.
Yeah.
Well, OK, you could lose that position. That just leaves you another 787, just shy of 787 million to solve.
Well, so exactly.
And it might be symbolic, but it won't solve the problem.
No, and that's when reality kicks in, and you've got to deliver education,
100%.
Your local schools, deliver social work, social care, all this type of stuff. So it's going to be very difficult.
Correct. Kevin, great to see you. Thank you. Kevin Schofield, who's off to look for, who is it you saw in the reception?
Huey from the Fun Loving Criminals.
Huey from the Fun Loving Criminals. And Finn, Corn-Fed Finn, our one of our assistant producers out there, he didn't know who the Fun Loving Criminals were.
He had to Google it.
He had to Google it.
That.
Amy, do you know who the Fun Loving Criminals are? Adam does. Come on.
Oh, shaking heads
Adam's
everywhere.
like, 49 or something. He must know who they are. All right, he's in his 30s. They were big, the Fun Loving Criminals.
They were big, yes. I will go to my grave saying
they were big. Yeah,
I saw them play the Barrowlands in Glasgow.
And here he is in the studio behind us right now.
Yeah, I know.
Somewhere.
I've got to go.
Got to go and look for him. Kevin, thank you. We'll speak very soon. Kevin Schofield with us on the programme. Over to you in just a second as well. 0344 499 1000.
hiding the fact that this is probably Labour's #1 most toxic policy since they came into government last July. And let's be honest, there's quite a lot of them which are pretty unpopular. But this has really struck a chord with voters. We saw it on the streets of Runcorn and in actual fact all over the country last Thursday, when at the first opportunity voters gave Labour the biggest kicking they could. The problem I think Keir Starmer finds himself now is that actually he's boxed himself in so much, he's expended so much political capital on this policy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 2. Let's go back to your calls. Dave's in London on Indian trade. Dave, what are you making of it all?
Well, if you work for Jaguar Land Rover right now, Ian.
Yep.
That's an Indian-owned company.
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't so the people that are running it, they're India-based. So why wouldn't they just say, well, do you know what? Over the next 2 or 3 years, let's tone down and reduce down the people we put in from the UK, and let's bring over some of our own people and executives from India and just replace them. You can pay them the same, but as from a company's point of view, you're saving money. You're saving, what, 10, 15, 20% on the Indian worker than you are on the...
Yeah, because am I right, does this deal also means employers' national insurance won't be there? Is that right? Because there seems to be a bit of a sketchy area there. What?
No,
why?
No, they don't pay that either, no.
But because they pay into another fund, so it apparently doesn't... What somebody explained earlier, and it might have been Jacob Rees-Mogg or one of those characters that somebody was quoting, was that it wouldn't be worth the faff to do that, bearing in mind you'd be talking about temporary workers replacing maybe full-time workers, and it would be a lot of bureaucracy for little gain. I don't know. Is that true? Does that sound right to you, Dave? Or does that sound like someone saying that, but secretly they're going to do it anyway?
Yeah, well, temporary worker, right? So you're here for 2.5, 3 years, then you just extend the visa.
Well, as the Indian businesswoman we had on earlier said, who would agree with you, Dave, she said, 3 years isn't temporary. That's quite a long time. It's not temporary is 6 months, maybe.
Yeah, well, and then, OK, fine, then send that worker back to India and bring another one over. That's now 6 years of that role. Then send another one back and bring another one over. That's
but that's what I mean about the FAF thing. The argument that was being made would be that would suggest it's not a skilled or a crucial worker, because you wouldn't want to change your operations director every couple of years, or would you?
Why not?
Yeah, if it's going to say, if there's significant savings.
I would even worry if I was in senior management over there, because why would I employ, say, you as the head, the CEO or the general manager for 500 grand, and then I'm paying all of your national insurance and everything else on top.
Yeah.
I just bring someone else over, put them in there. I'm saving a fortune.
And also, there is I think the myth that some people are running out on is that, that India is sort of, everyone's in poverty or something. India's got some of the best universities, some of the best brains on the planet. It's not as if the people they're bringing over have come from some kind of slumdog millionaire scenario, and they're going to have to educate them up. These would already be some of the brightest brains.
Yeah, and it goes down to care homes as well. My brother used to work in a care home out in the Lincolnshire area, and that was recently taken over by Indian people. They basically have just gotten rid of everyone that's British, and now it's just a complete Indian family that runs the whole thing. So they've just gotten, that's it. They're not going to, they're going to bring their own people in, their own, that they understand. They're not going to, so that they've all gone. So that's right down to just a care home.
Yeah.
So, and they'll now just say, oh, great, I now need to bring over a new maintenance guy or something for the care home. I'll just bring in a relative from India that's pretty handy with a spanner, and that's it. Well, what's the problem?
Again, the other counter-argument on this, Dave, is that, so you could argue there's going to be a slight disparity between some workers, but for the country overall, we are going to be, it's still a beneficial trade deal. So it might be a bit quirky, might be a bit, you can make those comparisons, but as a trade deal, it's better for us as a country.
Well, then people need to come out with a long list of things that we're going to be selling to India. I'm not aware of a load of stuff we're going to be selling to India, are you?
Apparently whiskey.
Okay, so well done. So what I should say then is, if you live in Scotland up there making whiskey, your quid's in. And also, I suspect this is something to do with trying to, I guess, there's plenty of Indian people that can afford to buy a top-end Range Rover. Just as there would be in the States or anywhere else. So I suspect this is something to do with that, because Land Rover are the ones mostly affected by or heavily affected by the American tariffs.
Yeah, of course.
So this might be a way for them to to get more.
So they would be getting a little kind of breather from this, where they were being collared by the Americans. Apparently, apparently the UK exports to India will increase by 15 billion a year, creating new jobs and increasing wages by 2.2 billion.
Yeah, nice headline. So give me the breakdown, mate. Tell me so whiskey. What are we talking? Or is the whole of Scottish whiskey suddenly going to go to India? I don't think so.
Every single bottle of Scottish whiskey won't just go there. It'll be made in Delhi.
Yeah, give me a full breakdown, please, of where you've come up with that number.
Yep.
So I can go down the list of all the products and I can say to myself, yeah, that sounds good. The Indian likes to drink lots of whiskey, so that'll go. But I bet you when you get down to the 10th thing on the list, it's getting very, 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 very dubious.
But it's still, whatever is on the list, it's still a list of 5 billion quid's worth of stuff that we will gain from.
Yeah, but it's only a list. I've come up with the list in order to give you a number, in order to stop you talking about the immigration thing. That list won't materialise. It's just smoke and mirrors again from whoever's put the deal together. They've come up with this number. How many times have they been right with any number they ever come up with?
Yeah.
So,
It's all about the Scottish whiskey. That's all you have to remember, Dave.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I put my head in my hands. This Starmer guy, if this is what going further and faster means, well, I think it's going to be quicker that he's going to go.
Why would Jacob Rees-Mogg and the like, Daniel Hannan, people like that, be agreeing with this, saying it's a good deal?
because they're likely to have businesses that are likely to benefit from it.
Interesting one to finish on. Dave, thank you. That's Dave down in London on Indian trade. One in here from Alan in Titchfield about PMQs. He says, afternoon, Ian. Today, no mention of the elections, no welcome for the newest Member of Parliament. I don't believe for a moment that reform were ignored yet again. What an absolute disgrace. An absolute nobody seemed to have even noticed. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Would the Prime Minister or the Leader of the Opposition generally welcome somebody who's turned up at a by-election? Probably not. But yeah, I do get it. Maybe one of the reform people mentioned it. I don't know. Did Sarah Pouching get a question in, even? 0344 499 1000. Back with more from you. We've got Boris Johnson, the Indian trade deal, train drivers, all manner of things on the agenda at this end. Our lines are open. It's 2:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
5-3 on Talk. More comment from you. Dave says the issue with Boris Johnson and his surprise party was that he made it law that if you were a manager in any company and you walked in on such a party, you were bound by law to put that party to an end and dismiss or disperse the people there. I don't remember anything that's... I have to say, Dave in Kingston, I bow to your knowledge, unless he was asked specifically about that. But I would guess that was just a given, wouldn't it be? If you were... I never recall that question being put to him directly. This is the hypocrisy that everyone is complaining about, not that he had a slice of cake. Yes, that's true. And regardless of whether we slightly disagree on whether he was specifically asked that question, it didn't matter because that was implicit anyway in the rules. Nobody should have been having a party. But then you got into that territory of what do you do in the workplace? Firstly, what is a party? And if this was in a Crown Court, you would absolutely be defining the life out of that sentence. What specifically is a party? Are some people having a glass of wine after work? Is that a party? If they were all drinking a cup of tea after work in exactly the same scenario, all socially distanced, that wouldn't be seen as a party. And there's so much to it. There's so many layers to that Downing Street party thing. However, there were some occasions that whatever the nuances of some of those moments, there was the memo, wasn't there? We're having a bit of a bash on Friday night. Bring a bottle. Bring a bottle. People walking in with suitcases, full of ale. They were having a party. How many of those happened? I don't, at that kind of level, I don't know. And how many of those would Boris Johnson have personally known about? I mean, if you know anything about the functioning of Downing Street, it's a dead cert. He wouldn't really have known that one part of a massive building was going to have... There's different departments, obviously, within the building as well. We're going to have some kind of, party together. Lots of people wouldn't have known about it. Other staff might not have known about it, etc. I'm not defending it. I'm just looking at the reality of that. The fact is, if you're Downing Street or any other government department, you should have just been squeaky clean from the off, right? And the idea that people were getting, as I think the overarching point that Dave in Kingston is making, the idea that people were getting fined for going for a walk. Remember, there were a couple of ladies who were going for a walk, and because they had tea in their flasks, it was seen as a social occasion rather than their exercise. There was all this guff and nonsense, and nobody really knew what was going on. And it was, this wasn't some... I know there's theories out there that this was some sort of coordinated, attack from a global group. It was global groupthink, but I'm not absolutely sure it was done to let's see if we can control the masses in some sort of Bond villain style. The manifestation felt like that, but I don't think any of these people are bright enough to come up with such a crazed idea. And of course, it didn't happen everywhere. Not every country did adhere to that. Not every state in America adhered to that. So there were differences. Would we do it all again? Nope. Let's move to this story. Interesting one. Police were too slow to tackle the online rumours that helped spark last summer's Southport riots. This is according to a fairly damning report. We know that 3 young girls were murdered at that Taylor Swift-themed dance class, with false claims about the killer's background spreading rapidly online. Chief Inspector Sir Andy Cook says forces are still ill-equipped to deal with digital misinformation and must work more openly with the mainstream media. Let's get a word on this with Harry Miller, former police officer, founder of Fair Cop, and regularly helps us out with these kind of stories. Afternoon to you, Harry.
Yeah, afternoon.
It is the whole changing world that we are in heavily involves social media. I was trying to work out what should the police have done? What should the police's role have been? Is that a case of a top cop going online and reading some conspiracy theories? What was lacking, do you think, in their information or their gathering of information here, Harry?
The police have entirely lost their way, really. They don't really know what it is they're looking for anymore. They've confused gathering genuine intelligence about crime with saying naughty and hurty words on Twitter. The two things are very, very different. The police should restrict themselves solely to looking for information which suggests that a crime has taken place or a crime is about to take place. They should limit themselves to looking at people who have shown a pattern over a period of time of fraternising with genuinely dangerous ideology, coupled with chatting with genuinely dangerous people, and who have it in their minds to do something which is genuinely dangerous. Now, the police can't do that because they are so busy, and have been so busy now for a number of years, checking up on anything that supports orthodoxy, anything that is politically contentious. And not only do we have police officers wasting their time, we have Prevent, the body of officers who are meant to find terrorists, who are meant to intervene before people become terrorists. We find them visiting the homes of children and young ladies because they've said something so mild on Twitter, it doesn't even come close to the foothill of fraternising with terrorism. Sure. Now, when you have limited resources, you cannot be in two places at once. And so the very first thing that police must do, they need to reorientate their thinking so that they know that they are only checking for people who are engaging and fraternising with terrorist ideology. I don't think any of us would have a problem with the police doing that, and particularly if it stops the kind of atrocity that we saw in Southport.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, if the police do see information online, you'd almost have to have. I don't know. Would you have to have almost another police force just dealing with the online stuff, Harry? I mean, is that the world we're going to have to live in? That we need a digital police force as well as the conventional one?
No, I don't think we do. The digital world. Let's be fair. The digital revolution is fairly young, and I can imagine that come the invention of the printing press, there was the same type of moral panic. How do we police people who are putting their ideas down on paper?
Yeah.
So I think it will eventually sort itself out. The problem is that in this very fast-moving digital revolution that we are in the beginnings of right now, the police are somewhat lost, and part of the reason they're lost is that they become disjointed from the law. Now, the law is not subject to whether it's analog or digital. It doesn't matter. What the police have got to know, they've got to understand what the law is. They've got to understand the principle that we as Englishmen and women are free to think, to speak, to act in any way we like, right up until the point that we either break the law, or we encourage others to break the law, or we conspire to break the law. So that's the starting point. Now, the other thing that we have to do is recognise that sometimes people say things when they're angry in the heat of the moment, and that this is not an indicator of future criminal action. What it is, it's an indicator of current frustration. Yeah. The police need to recognise that not every threat that is made on Twitter is a genuine threat. Not every claim on Twitter which is preposterous is indicative of having a terrorist ideology. They need to separate this out. What they're doing at the moment is they're tilting at windmills, they're chasing shadows, they're going at hurty words. They are policing our tweets instead of the streets. We know that. And they need to learn that they need to learn to respect our freedoms to speak and express ourselves, sometimes in quite robust and emotional ways, and limit themselves to hunting down actual terrorists, people who are engaged and planning terrorist activities, because they can't do better.
If there is I don't know, if a cop in the tea room happens to spot a tweet saying it's all going to kick off in Southport tonight, we're going to go down there with some bricks and, we're going to really show the system what is wrong. How would the police deal with that? Do they take that seriously? Do they investigate that? Because by the time that's been posted, suddenly it's been shared to 5,000 others. Loads of others are chipped in saying, count me in, I'll be there as well. How can they legitimately respond to that without upsetting either side of this?
Well, they can. If the police get information like that and it appears to be from a genuine, credible source, if it's posted by somebody in Colorado and it relates to something that's happening in Grimsby, then you can pretty much dismiss it, can't you? But if it's posted by somebody in Grimsby or Lincolnshire and there are other people responding to it and there appears to be a degree of organisation going on, conspiracy is beginning to emerge, then of course the police should act on that, because part of their job is to keep us safe. Part of their job is to anticipate where trouble is likely to occur and try and make sure that it doesn't occur, or if it does occur, to nip it in the bud as quickly as possible. Yeah. The problem is not with doing that sort of thing. All of us were in favour of that. The problem is in seeing demons under the bed. The problem is where every utterance that somebody makes that is politically orthodox or politically unpopular at the moment is seen also as a terrorist threat. And so the police, like headless chickens, go chasing after things which have got nothing to do with terrorism at all, whilst missing the actual real-life threat. And this is why policing takes proper intelligence. We need to put the intelligence back into intelligence. That's what needs to happen. We need to know, is this person credible? Is this person who said this thing, are other people within the area and who have the means and the opportunity to carry out the threat?
Yeah.
Is all that present? And if it is present, then of course the police should make an operational decision about whether or not to act. But there's no magic solution with any of this, Ian. It takes common sense and it takes proper, genuine intelligence.
Indeed. Just a final point while you're with us, Harry, and this does have a connection to Southport. Criminals who avoid their sentencing will face longer jail time or lose some privileges. A lot of victims' families have said this is a step in the right direction. The killer responsible for those horrendous murders in Southport didn't show up. Other characters, some fairly high-profile cases quite recently, haven't shown up. And, of course, there is a sense that that's an injustice in itself. You weren't there to truly face that final point of justice when you were sentenced. But, of course, how do you make somebody there? Short of dragging them there, that could turn out to be a pantomime, as we saw a little bit in the Southport criminal case. Is this a step in the right direction, longer sentences? Although if you're getting a full life sentence, I don't know what else you can get.
Well, I think it's absolutely important that people face their victims or the family of their victims at the point of sentence. Personally, I would drag them into the dock by their balls. But there are a number of human rights lawyers who say that I was wrong to do that. And so the next best thing is just give them an indeterminate sentence. Yeah. I would just keep them locked up in solitary confinement or whatever it took until they agreed to come and meet the people who they'd harmed. It's as simple as that.
Harry, always good to get your wisdom on these things. Very thorough stuff, as ever, from Harry Miller, former police officer and founder of Fair Cop, with us on the programme. You want to respond to any of that as well? 0344 499 1000. What does a police officer do when they spot online somebody going, there's going to be a riot in the middle of this town centre, we're going to kick off tonight, we don't like XYZ, or we're unhappy with this, that or the other, so bring some bricks with you, boys, we're going to kick off. How do the police respond to that? What should their response be? Lines are open on that. Back to that question as well of Boris Johnson. Can Boris Johnson save the Tories? According to one poll, he's the only man who can. Train drivers and goodness knows what else we've got going on out there. And also this. Now, this is a pretty tasty thing to get your hands on. Time to find out how you could be with a chance of winning a weekend away in Munich at the end of May to watch the biggest game in European football. One of the biggest games in global football, let's be honest. This is the Champions League final. Wow, doesn't get any bigger. Thanks to our colleagues at talkSPORT, we're also going to put $5,000 in your pocket to spend. So you've got a stay in Munich, Champions League final ticket and $5,000 in your pocket too. What's not to like? Here's the details. Have a look.
Win a once-in-a-lifetime trip to watch the Champions League final live. Go to talksport.com/win for your chance to embark on the ultimate odyssey of football ecstasy. With 2 tickets to the Champions League final live at the iconic Munich Football Arena, Germany, including flights, accommodation, and an uber-massive $5,000 in your hand. How about that? Enter online now at talksport.com/win. Terms and conditions apply. Achtung, baby.
18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win that VIP trip, simply text the word football to 3338 by the 16th of May, 11 p.m. A text will cost you £2 plus one standard network rate message. You must have bill payer's permission. Or you can just send your name and number by post to Champions League Final Comp, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. It must arrive by 5 p.m. on May the 21st.
hiding the fact that this is probably Labour's #1 most toxic policy since they came into government last July. Let's be honest, there's quite a lot of them which are pretty unpopular. But this has really struck a chord with voters. We saw it on the streets of Runcorn and in actual fact all over the country last Thursday, when at the first opportunity voters gave Labour the biggest kicking they could. The problem I think Keir Starmer finds himself now is that actually he's boxed himself in so much, he's expended so much political capital on this policy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Lots to get through, including day 3 of The Voice of Doom. This, of course, is, well, I hope it's not going to go on for 21 days like the last one did. No end to that one. This one is day 3. Remember, it's a mystery voice thing. It's always got a political angle. That means it could be a politician, past or present, or someone quite obviously connected to politics in some shape or form. Have a listen to The Voice.
This is so interesting.
Who is that? It's not Matt Hancock, by the way. I know it sounds a bit like Matt Hancock. It's not Matt Hancock. Before you say it, it's not Matt Hancock. Don't say Matt Hancock. OK, here it is again.
This is so interesting.
And don't phone in either, because there's no prize or anything in this end for this. But you can message in 87222 if you fancy having a crack. If we get a right answer, hopefully we will today, after the news headlines at 3, we will reveal all. If we don't, it rolls over to day 4. Tomorrow. Here it is again.
This is so interesting.
87222 if you think you know. Matt in Derby says the issue isn't whether Boris was at a party or not. Please stop parroting this nonsense. We've not. That's a given. We know he probably wasn't at a party. I just made that clear a second ago. The issue is what he imposed on the rest of us while acting differently himself. The manner in which he and his staff conducted themselves inside Downing Street proves they didn't feel the virus was serious enough to require restrictions we all had to follow. If they did, they wouldn't have behaved as they did. That's why it's unforgivable. I don't honestly think, having spoken to staff, I don't think anybody thought, oh God, we got some inside information here. The virus isn't serious enough. And by the way, I lost count of how many times I drove home and saw people having parties, either inside their homes, in gardens or whatever. Downing Street certainly wasn't the only place that did it, whether it's a workplace or a private dwelling. But it's a horrendous look because it's Downing Street. It wasn't born out of like some inner knowledge or we'll be fine. I think most people thought, if I get it, I'll be fine. I mean, I never thought, I apparently had COVID, according to a test result, never had any effects from it. A mate of mine who's a bit younger than me, very fit guy, it almost killed him. I mean, he was on his back for about 3-4 weeks with this thing. It was horrendous. But I think most of us did think, it's probably not good. If I get it, I know a few people that have got it. My other half's got it. She was ill for a couple of days. She was fine. It was that kind of thing. And I think working among it, if you work in in big buildings where you're doing long hours, I would imagine there were lots of places that probably had a sneaky glass of wine or a couple of beers here and there. But it should never have happened in any form in Downing Street, of all places, particularly when you had the likes of Matt Hancock and co standing up in that panelled room telling everybody to stay at home and don't talk to anybody, don't go near your dog, etc. And right behind the wall that he was doing, right behind that wall, there were people having a bevy. I know it's a busy operating office. I'm pretty sure there were people who work in transport companies and God knows where else, who in the staff room opened a few tinnies at the end of the shift, etc. I don't dispute that, but it was Downing Street. That, to me, Matt in Derby, is what makes the difference. And of course, even if they had, 6 of these things over 2 or 3 years, or 10 of these things over 2, it's unforgivable. I would be forgiving if it was in any other setting almost, where people went, you know what, we'd normally have a cup of tea after work, let's have a glass of wine. I wouldn't have had a problem with that then, and I don't now. Dave's in Newcastle on that Indian trade deal. Dave, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Hello, Ian. Ian, it's cheap immigration.
Go on.
Cheap labour through the back door. And I can give you an example. So I'm a fuel tanker driver, and what a lot of the people don't know is when they go into a BP or an Esso or a Shell, actually, it's them particular petrol stations are not owned by the franchises. The vast majority of them throughout the country, and a lot of people don't know that.
Yep.
So if you look over the last 20, 30 years now, the vast majority of them shops now are staffed by people from this country. They're from India, they're from Pakistan and elsewhere,
Correct.
and it's cheap labour, Ian. You know, the legacy contracts from the people that the indigenous people, let's say, who used to work there, them legacy contracts have gone.
How is it cheap? I mean, you've got to get paid the minimum wage, right?
Well, you've got to pay the minimum wage. But for example, you know, there's people coming over on student visas, and they're sort of they're doing online business studies courses and things like that, university courses. You know, it's just pathetic, and they're getting paid £5 an hour sometimes. These are people I've spoke to as a fuel tanker driver. You know, quite a lot of them, their English isn't very good for a start, and the work, you know, so the whole system has been broken down by an influx of cheap labour. There's a reason why we've not got the indigenous population working in these petrol stations, and it's because of that breakdown.
Do you know what? Can I just to interject, Dave? I've got a very real life example. So our local petrol, the one near me, near the railway station, was one of those. It was Waitrose, you know, like they have Marks and Spencers or Waitrose, whatever, the shop. And I don't know who used to run the petrol side of it, but it was all local people that worked in there. There was a couple of Indian guys who were British Indian, as it were. And when Shell took it over, so it's still got Waitrose produce in there, but it's now obviously Shell. Have you got a Shell Club Card, whatever the hell it is? It does my nut in every time I try to buy some petrol. It's now it's completely Indians that work in there. In fact, the last indigenous person, if that's the right phrase, was one of the Indian guys who said, I'm not working here anymore, the conditions aren't good enough, they've changed the hourly rate, it's still legal, and they've changed the conditions as well, so I'm not doing it. And that's not unusual, right?
That's the prime example, exactly. So if you've seen that, and I'm telling you that that's happening nationwide, Ian, you know, and even just as a fuel tanker driver myself, I think there's loads that listen to your show, you know, and things like that.
Sure.
You know, when you pick up, when you're on your way to these petrol stations, in the past you'd pick up the phone and you'd get somebody, let's say a British person, and you know, you might be struggling to find a place. It's quite easy to explain over the phone.
So that's like a practical reason why it can't work. Listen, I've got to step in, Dave, because the news is upon us. Here's the voice of doom.
This is so interesting.
Who is that? Lines are open. News at 3 next.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the home of common sense. So, lots to come. We are talking about how the Tories, according to one result, the Tories can only beat Nigel Farage and his Reform UK party by bringing back Boris Johnson. This is according to a new poll as rumours swirl about a push to oust Kemi Badenoch. Well, would they really do that? Some senior Tories saying that would be a terrible thing. Others are quietly saying that would be the best thing. But who with? Boris Johnson? Would it work? Could it work? Would he even want the job, for goodness sake? More comments on that. Could he be the man to save the Tories? Also, the government insists British workers aren't being undercut by a new trade deal with India, despite claims that Indian staff will pay less tax for the same jobs. What are those jobs? Which areas will they be working in? Will it be the call I just had with Dave before the news? Will they be just working in petrol stations? Will there be skilled jobs? As such, what's the deal? By the way, nothing wrong with working in a petrol station. And also, US President Donald Trump is doubling down on threats to make Canada the 51st state of the United States, warning newly elected Canadian PM Mark Carney, never say never. I thought Carney gave him a proper riposte, as I think is the polite way of saying it. Canada's not for sale and never will be, he said to a president slightly shaking his head with incredulity. More on that as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. Shirley says Boris Johnson is the sole reason we are in this dire position we are in with this god-awful Labour government. It was his fault, says Shirley. We gave him a large majority. He threw it to the wall. He did nothing with it. He didn't even get Brexit done as he promised he would. He's just a personality who likes to be liked. An utter fool. I'm glad he's no longer in politics. We'll speak to one of his senior advisors in just a couple of seconds' time. Would he come back? People might say, well, actually, Johnson got completely scuppered, didn't he? Because, you know, no sooner had he got his feet under the table and this COVID thing came around the corner like wildfire, and they never really did manage to get to grips with very much as a result of that. D. Singh says reform equals unknown plus alternative risk plus test the true values of New Britain. That's almost written in code, that, Mr. Singh. Thank you very much indeed. Now, before the news, we had the voice of doom. Mystery voice with a political angle to it. Could be an MP, past or present, or someone connected to politics. Here's the voice.
This is so interesting.
Who is that? And remember, I did say at the beginning, it's not Matt Hancock, even though lots of people have contacted us saying, is it Matt Hancock? Stephen Kinnock, no. Lionel Blair, no. Gavin Williamson, it is not. Tom Tugendhat, no. Ian Duncan Smith, no. Dominic Raab, it is not. Peter Hitchens, it's definitely not. But let's have another listen.
This is so interesting.
I mean, that's definitely not Peter Hitchens, right? Andy Street, former mayor, no. Jeremy Brown, it is not. We don't have a winner. It rolls over again. It's back tomorrow for day 4. Stand by for that. So could Boris Johnson be the Tories' only hope? This is a new poll that shows that 60% of Conservative voters want him back as leader. He's seen as the only one that could realistically beat Nigel Farage's Reform UK party after that mauling they had last Thursday. It comes as pressure also mounts on Kemi Badenoch, with her closest rival Robert Jenrick polling even worse than Kemi. They often say, well, you know, put Robert Jenrick in there, he's a little bit more like Reform and that will please the public. He's not too much like them, so therefore that, well, according to this poll, Kemi is more popular than Robert. And I wonder whether Robert Jenrick would just look a little bit kind of like Farage light in some respects. Kemi Badenoch has been improving her game at PMQs over the last few weeks, but of course it takes more than 27 minutes at the dispatch box every Wednesday to make people believe you are the person who should be Prime Minister. Let's speak with Oscar Reddrop, former number 10 advisor to Boris Johnson. Afternoon to you, Oscar. Look, I know surveys and polls come and go, and, you know, we tend to pounce on them when the headlines are fairly delicious. This is one such example I think we can all agree on. But would Boris Johnson even do a job like that? Would he come back to politics if he felt his people wanted him?
I think, you know, I think it's Look, I think when Boris resigned, wrongly or rightly, he believed that he got that great big stonking majority and that it should be the people, the electorate, that boot him out, probably not his own MPs. So I think there will always be that sense of what could have been, you know, the whole levelling up agenda, that huge project, and people can kind of sniff at that and turn their noses up at it a bit, but that was a vision, that was a general sense of direction that we don't have in this country now, that big picture. And I think, you know, he'd never admit to it, and I think he's, you know, he's doing lots of good stuff, he's had his book out, blah, blah, blah. But of course, I think there's that opportunity missed in his head, and, you know, I think he probably still thinks about that.
What he said, he's always said he got the big decisions right, or so I'm slightly paraphrasing, but it was something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that was, look, when things were really, really bad, and things inevitably, it comes for every single leader, things obviously get really, really bad. And you want to be able to bang your fist on the desk in support of that leader and say, yes, but we did X, we did Y, we did Z. And, you know, Keir Starmer doesn't have that. I think that was something Rishi struggled to articulate. You know, yes, things are tough. Yeah, we made mistakes here, there, and everywhere. But look, we've got these huge things done. Whereas I think Boris did have that. He had quite seismic, I think, big calls that he got right during very, very, very dark and challenging times. Now, the thing I have empathy with is they say, you know, you should never go back. And there'll be a lot of people who loved Boris back in 2019, but won't want to go there again. They feel burned by it, or it's not as emotional as that. They just feel like he had his shot, didn't work out, don't want him again.
I mean, I did mention COVID as well, which, like, you know, kind of took out the best part of his time. When I say the best, I mean the majority of his time in number 10 was dominated by a pandemic.
Yeah, and people don't want to hear excuses, but the levelling up agenda that I think would have been truly transformative in many ways to this country, you know, for obvious reasons due to COVID, wasn't able to get off the ground. And when I talk about the regret that Boris may or may not have, I don't think it's the regret that he's no longer Prime Minister, but I do genuinely believe it's a regret that he never, at least, he never got to see what that would look like and actually really follow that plan through and drive that for 4 or 5 years without a pandemic. Just generally for the Conservative Party, though, what I would say is, you know, I don't actually subscribe to the view that Kemi's doing some terrible job here. I think we are still 4 years from an election, and this is a really harsh reality for the Conservative Party, who are inevitably, intrinsically in some ways, quite attention-seeking because they've been quite used to power. But the general public just aren't ready to hear from them at the moment. Yeah. They don't care about the Conservative Party right now, and that's kind of okay. And don't get me wrong, like there will come a point where we're running out of time, that becomes not okay. But a bit of calmness, I think, is probably no bad thing. And for them to chop and change leaders again, which was part of the problem, it was part of that self-destructive tendencies the party had to chop and change leaders that made the public feel so sick and tired of them. And to do that in opposition at this early stage would be really, really, really stupid.
Is there any, I mean, it's all very well when these polls come out and, you know, Boris Johnson is the man that could save the Tories, etc. I don't know how many people ask Mr Johnson when they put these polls together, would you come back? Would you do it? I mean, if you think of the logistics of it, you'd have to find an ultra-safe Conservative seat to begin with in order for him to become a Member of Parliament again and then parachuted immediately into the top job, assuming all Tory MPs voted for him to do that. Blurb, you'd have to go through all of that. Would he do it, do you think? If somebody said, look, it's guaranteed you're going to not only become an MP, we're going to, you know, give you whoever's seat, the safest Tory seat in the land, and then we're going to make you the leader. If it was put to him like that, would Boris Johnson re-walk the plank in reverse?
I don't know the answer to that, but he's a fighter, isn't he? I mean, I think And I don't think there was any. I think the other element, and I'm not being very polished in my answer here, but I'm really trying to genuinely think about it and give you a proper
No, I know
answer.
you always do, Oscar.
There was no love lost between him and Keir Starmer, and I think if the Tory party were in a position where, as you said, it was all the right environment was there and it was all perfectly set up for him, I think he'd love to take the fight. Because he is a fighter, and actually, I know it's a bit of a kind of a naff thing to say in a way, but he loves the Conservative Party. I don't think he takes any pleasure in watching it suffer electorally like it is at the moment at all. But the other thing to bear in mind with it is that you look at politics at the moment in this country and the slight vacuum for direction and charisma, and that out-the-box thinking leadership, unpredictable. Some people may say chaotic. I absolutely take that on board. But when Boris was Prime Minister, Farage, who was unbelievably impressive as a politician, do not get me wrong, he was at that moment in time, he was a TV presenter. Yeah. And so that vacuum and that void has been filled at this moment in time. And I'm a huge football fan, and I've watched my West Ham football team get rid of a very successful football manager and just lose every single week and struggle and struggle and struggle and struggle. And you do think, like, this is the thing with Boris, that the ultimate kind of joker card in many ways is that he won elections. And when you lose them after replacing your winner, naturally, I think a lot of MPs and a lot of Tories out there, they look in the mirror and they go, let's get the winner back.
I mean, that's very true, isn't it? There is that sense that, I still find it odd, because do you remember, we've probably talked about this before, Oscar, in 2019, when the 80-odd seat majority came in, the word on the street was always, look, that's Boris Johnson has a job not for one term but two, because it would be extraordinary if an opposition party turned over such a majority, that in itself, and in fact it would take Scotland to fall for that to happen. And of course Scotland did fall, and then the whole Partygate or whatever else, whether it's lockdowns, regardless, all of that came to a head, and it was kind of the perfect storm almost, because it was genuinely unthinkable in 2019 that Boris Johnson was not going to be a 10-year Prime Minister.
Yeah, and actually, interestingly, when you look at the height of it, and this is what people around Kemi may be well thinking, why we shouldn't rush to judgments on stuff. After Hartlepool 21, when Boris was, the just completely squatting over the entirety of British politics, it looked like he was completely unstoppable. Keir Starmer was thinking about resigning, and then yet what? 3 years later, he secures that huge majority for the Labour Party. So much can change. There should be patience from a Conservative perspective, the humility to understand that the public don't want more dramatics and turmoil. Yet I do understand the temptation to bring your winner back. And just lastly, on the kind of the leadership vacuum thing that I think people feel, is that what I would say, however, is that you need to separate the qualities a leader could bring your party from the leader himself. And in some ways, if I'm being really objective, I feel like the Tories are just crying out for some of his characteristics rather than him himself. Because, and I'm sure, your callers and your texters, they'll go, we don't want Boris, we don't want to hear from him on immigration, on how he felt he dealt with COVID, Partygate, etc., etc. He's a busted flush, we don't want to hear from him. But at the same time, the Reform Party despise Boris Johnson, and you have to wonder why. I think he is probably still a threat to them.
Yeah,
and
well, he was. Yeah, I was about to say he's the one that when you said that Conservatives want some some elements of Boris. It's that's the kind of argument around Nigel Farage, isn't it? He's got this kind of, he sells optimism. He speaks like, despite being, privately educated, fairly middle class chap, he can speak to the man in the pub. Boris Johnson could do exactly the same thing. You'd have been there. You'd have seen him. I've seen it many times as well with Johnson. He could stop in the street and have a chin wag with anybody.
The cut through that he is able to get, and it's the same with Farage, is unteachable. It is so rare. It's something that comes around so rarely, and it's a tough thing for a party to reject and to not be tempted by in this case. It's the reason why we don't have polls, or we don't sit around hypothesizing, should we get Rishi back or Theresa May, the rumours surrounding, there's a reason why it's always Boris. There's a reason why it's always Boris. And, for now it is just a bit of fun, I guess. And, or maybe, or can you imagine a hypothetical situation, a scenario? But the Reform Party are very happy that Boris Johnson is out of the political picture.
Yeah, 100%. Listen, great to chat, Oscar. I think it's the first time you've revealed you're a Hammers fan as well. I don't think that's ever come up in any of our...
Depressing.
Chat. Well, you missed relegation, so there is, be thankful for that, I suppose. But, I think United on Saturday, isn't it?
It is indeed, but being a Tory and a West Ham fan all at once is it's quite tough at the moment, Ian.
Yeah, it was tougher at Upton Park, wasn't it, than where you are now, to be fair. So, listen, Oscar, great to have you on. Oscar Reddrop, former advisor to Boris Johnson over there at Number 10. Thank you to him. I thought he was very honest in the way that he articulated that, and I thought the really interesting point is that what Tories are really crying out for isn't specifically Boris Johnson, but it's some of those attributes, that ability to sell positivity. Remember just before Brexit, if you vote for Brexit, this could be our Independence Day. And it was an incredible speech. I think it was at Wembley when he did that. And of course, he was flanked by not just other Conservatives, but Labour Brexiteers. There were still some of those. That's it. That's the point. But then you get him somewhere else when he's mumbling and stumbling, and you think, oh man, will somebody come along and please help him? He's like the kid at a sports day that's not that good that you desperately want him to win a medal, because you took go on, you can get through that sentence, Boris. Come on, you can do it. A little bit of news just come in as well. Breaking news from the Mail. Asylum accommodation, including hotels, will cost the taxpayer £15 billion over 10 years, according to Spending Watchdogs. That's the overall bill is more than triple the Home Office's original estimate. This is from the National Audit Office. Contracts were originally forecast to cost £4.5 billion over a decade. This is from 2019, as if that wasn't enough, but are now expected to run to 15.3 billion over the same period after the Channel crisis exploded. It means that the average taxpayer over the lifetime of these contracts will spend £4,191.780 £80 a day on housing asylum seekers over the course of that contract. I mean, does anybody really need an explanation as to why Nigel Farage and Reform are doing really well? And remember, the clue there, these contracts were first signed in 2019, who was in power then, and they were going to be £4.5 billion. So let that settle. We are talking about spending £15.3 billion on people that came here on a boat across the Channel with no invite, hardly ever with any kind of paperwork, and the only thing in common, their average age is 23, and they're all blokes, and we've got no idea who they are. 15.3 billion. And they're scratching their heads over there at Labour HQ and Tory HQ going, what's this Farage go? Why are people voting in this way? Are you stupid? Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of figure that will put Nigel Farage in number 10. The difficulty you have, of course, is that he's then got to do something about it. 0344 499 1000. Our lines are open. This is Talk.
finding unfair, but not as well as British citizens. They should have to be able to provide proof of medical insurance. But what they shouldn't be is less expensive to hire than the native population. And under these rules, essentially, it's going to be 20% cheaper for an employer to employ an Indian worker than a Brit. How on earth is that supposed to benefit our society when we've got worklessness that is currently off the charts, particularly in the lower paid sectors, particularly among 18 to 25-year-olds?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Back to your comments. Let's go to Georgina down in London. Georgina, what do you got for us? Afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. It just goes to show how desperate the Tories are now. If they want to get old Boris Johnson back, listen, they could get Elvis back from the dead to lead the party, and it wouldn't do them the slightest.
But you loved Boris back in the day, Georgina.
No. Listen,
You were a Boris fangirl. Come on, you had posters of him all over the place, a bumper sticker with his face on it. Goodness knows what.
I wouldn't. Listen, I'd keep his face over the fire to keep the children away from it. Don't be ridiculous. To be honest with you, I never forgave the Tories. I'd always been a Tory voter, but I'd never forgiven them for the ridiculous lockdowns, MPs going to visit girlfriends during lockdown, having parties, pathological lies. He got us into this ridiculous net zero madness, opened the floodgates for immigration. Do I need to go on? They have put this country into an economic downturn that's we've never recovered from it, Ian. And they forced our hand of this country to vote for the ridiculously poor party that we have now. And quite frankly, you've thrown us into an oubliette that we're not going to get out of. It's going to be near impossible to get out of. Boris Johnson has got a lot to answer for. And personally, I think it's totally delusional to even contemplate that any Tory voter, ex-Tory voter, would honour the Tories now with their vote again. And on the subject of the Tory, that we need to have a coalition. Reform need to have a coalition with the Tories. That's not going to happen. I've listened to Nigel Farage on many occasions when he's been having interviews, and he said categorically he wouldn't have a coalition with them. That he wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot barge pole, in essence.
Well, they all say that, don't they? I mean, the Tories are saying the same thing, but when push comes to shove...
With the difference between Nigel Farage and these people who are, I can't even say running the country, because they're not running it, they're making a holy hash of it. Yeah. Nigel is actually got the courage of his convictions, and he's a man of his word. If he says something, Ian... But mark my words, he will do it. He is not flimsy, and we as voters are not fickle, and we haven't got 5-minute memories. So the Tories, honestly, they are now a moribund political party.
What about Kemi? Can Kemi Badenoch save the Tories?
Oh, are you joking? Are you really joking?
I mean, she wasn't the Prime Minister back in the day. She wasn't responsible for all those big decisions that upset many Tory voters. She could say, OK, I was part of Rishi's administration, but broadly speaking, I wasn't there.
Hang on a minute. I've just seen a pig fly past my window. Don't be so ridiculous.
Come on, Georgina. You'll have Kemi bumper stickers next.
Not at all. Not on my car. Kemi, I've got talkTV one though. Kemi is a lovely girl. She's a really lovely lady, but I'm afraid she has not got the fire in her belly.
Yeah, you see, I think you're right there. It is a
lovely girl. Keir Starmer, wet lettuce. The only man with the fire in his belly to lead this country is Nigel Farage, and by golly, watch that space.
Watch that space, says Georgina down in London. Of course, the cynical side, maybe the potential negative side, is that, Nigel Farage does talk a great talk, an incredible communicator, a gifted orator, one of the few people that can turn up without notes and talk for 15, 20 minutes with authority, even if you don't. And again, you look at Farage, a bit like Johnson. As Oscar Redrop just said to us, these people are not taught this. You can't be taught that. It's like, you look at the world's greatest footballers. Ronaldo obviously had coaching from being about 2, but primarily the skills that he has are just kind of immutable characteristics of people, physically speaking, who it's just there. It's in you. It's there or it isn't. And those people come along once in a while. And it happens on the left a little bit. You had people, I don't know, you're kind of the Tony Benns or the Dennis Skinners of this world. Oddly, Corbyn was, the Corbyn, I wrote a book once that made the comparisons, or one of the chapters in the book made the comparisons between Corbyn supporters and Farage supporters. And they are very, very psychologically, obviously completely different parts of the spectrum politically, but very similar in lots of ways. Corbyn was a great speaker. In fact, the reason back there in 2017, 2019, the reason, against Theresa May, 2017, the reason he came frighteningly close was because they never unleashed Jeremy Corbyn on the great British public. And Theresa May was doing rather, do you remember this? Theresa May was doing quite well in the polls and Jeremy Corbyn wasn't doing very well. And then they started appearing on TV. Most people had never seen Theresa May in debating action or Jeremy Corbyn in debating action. Now, it turns out that one of the greatest weaknesses of Theresa May was her ability to debate and speak live. And one of the greatest skills of Jeremy Corbyn was his ability to debate and speak live. So the Tories were like, oh God, we didn't realise we'd unleashed this. So Corbyn came out with it rather well. Even if you didn't like the bloke, he always sounded, he was a mad sort of union Marxist kind of stereotype. You can play all that game as much as you like. But he sounded in control and that changed the game. So my point is, do we have to be cautious of those that have the fire in their belly? Because having it there and sounding good and always having an answer and being on, quote, your side, speaking, quote, your language, we had that with Boris. And look what happened. And could that be the potential, I would say it's a hurdle, for a hurdle to be avoided by Reform UK. I think they're painfully aware of it. Everybody in Reform UK knows it is very much centred around one man. And yes, there are others, and there are great people, and now there's some good councillors and others, but we haven't seen a party form in this way before, not quite this way. And that internally is always going to be a bit of a battle that Reform UK have. Their job is to keep that battle away from public gaze, as it were, and retain. The reason why people like them is they speak in the language of ordinary people, but can they do it and do they fully mean it? So details on the way and more comment coming from you as well. It's all on the back of that question of can Boris Johnson save the Tories, which comes in an opinion poll that says more Tories than not would actually quite like him back. The only person that could beat Farage. I'm not so sure about that. Our lines are open. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's Talk One from Cliff, who says, I was a lifelong Conservative until Mr Cameron took over, at which point I left the party. With Boris Johnson, it seemed to me that his wife was really running the country. I like Kemi and I think she should be given more time. Bring back Boris? No thanks, says Cliff. One here, similar, as a previous Tory voter, now reform, absolutely no way do we want Boris, and neither should the Tories. He would now beat the death of the party. His net zero zealousy puts me right off. And John on the Isle of Coal says, Boris coming back just shows how ridiculous British politics is. It is a bit of that, isn't it? I mean, that's the kind of, we are reduced to debating that point based on nothing more than an opinion. I know it's an opinion poll, but there's clearly the people that were asked in the opinion poll, and the same science that they apply to opinion polls threw up the answer that Tories reckon Johnson could take on Farage. Really? Let's go across the Atlantic on this one. Canada's Prime Minister, Mark Carney, he's been over there. He's had the Oval Office treatment. Everyone's been at it, haven't they? Starmer had a go. That fella from Ukraine got his head kicked in, pretty much, by the Vice President and the President. We've had, of course, Mr Macron paid a visit. The Irish leader paid a... They've all been over there for a bit of a powwow, a tete-a-tete and a nice handshake with Mr Trump, just to, test the water and see how it goes. Well, on this occasion, it was particularly significant, I would say, because, of course, Canada, the nearest neighbours to the United States, and all that's gone on. Donald Trump, of course, is making that push to make Canada the 51st state. Mark Carney was at the White House for the first time since being elected, and he essentially shut down that idea that Trump had come up with. Let's have a listen to what the Canadian Prime Minister had to say.
There are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, Buckingham Palace that you visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But the opportunity is in the partnership and what we can build together. And we have done that in the past.
There it is. The President, meanwhile, responded by warning, never say never. He got the last word in many respects. Michael Graham, US political commentator and managing editor of Inside Sources. Michael, good afternoon to you. I was kind of waiting
I have to correct you. I have to stop and correct you first thing. You said you're coming across the Atlantic. It's now the Mar-a-Lago Lagoon. This got changed.
Sorry. I keep forgetting.
Or Lagoon del Mar-a-Lago.
Well, I could get there I could go a different way via the Gulf of Mexico, but that would be equally as problematic, of course.
Exactly, because that's the Gulf of America now. So
Indeed.
And I thought that the Prime Minister of the United States of Canada did a fine job of representing himself to his new boss, President.
Indeed. I thought what was interesting was that the, I was kind of waiting for J.D. Vance to just pop out the back and punch him in the face or something. But that didn't happen. It was, the thing I find about this, because, Carney, in fairness, he's a leader of another country. He responded very politely and honestly. And I think Trump's kind of okay with that. He could have called Trump a scumbag and Trump would have been okay with that because his skin is thick. He knows it's a bit of a game to a degree, even though the stakes are very serious. It seemed to be a very amicable chat. I don't know what they talked about behind the scenes, but certainly publicly, for the Canadian Prime Minister, it couldn't have gone better, I suppose.
Look, the Prime Minister did the two things that Trump needed. One is he didn't go out of his way just to be a jerk to Trump, and you're a fascist, and didn't he do that stupidity. The same thing is he didn't let himself get pushed around. Donald Trump doesn't respect people who let themselves get pushed around. I mean, I think one of the things that has made his relationship with President of Ukraine, Zelensky, off when they were kind of theoretical allies back during the whole fight, the impeachment stuff and the phone call and all that crap, is that anyone who's losing, Trump has a problem with. And obviously, Russia has been, pushing. I think Ukraine has done an astonishing job, and that you could argue that they are winning by not losing. But I'm saying? He looks at the leaderboard. He says, Israel big on top, Gaza in the dirt. Screw Gaza. Russia big, powerful, bombing. Ukraine on the ropes. I don't know that I want to be with the guy on the ropes. And so Prime Minister Carney came in and said, look, Mr. President, here's how far we'll go. We will go no farther. That's it. Trump joked with him instead of getting upset or, Mr. President. And he said, I took the joke, and he bounced it right back. And so Donald Trump gave him the seal of approval. I suspect you'll see temperatures coming down soon. My question is, Trump announced yesterday there's going to be a huge announcement today, something unbelievable. It's going to be amazing. It's unbelievable. And so I'm just assuming that he's going to announce that he has declared himself Pope. That's what I'm assuming. And he's picked out his Pope name. That's St. Lucifer. I mean, no, that wouldn't be right. St. Leviticus.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because as we speak, the papal conclave is assembling. As I'm sure you're aware, there, it looks like I
turned him down several times. They keep asking. I really am not.
It's extraordinary footage, and I look at this and think, oh, this looked like this in 1563, and it still looks like it. There's something wonderful about that, but quite mysterious. Great. I know nothing of what is going on over there in Italy, but I'm willing to believe that they've got, the fellow with the firelighters is at the back, ready to get the smoke going. I'm sure there's somebody with some bellows to make sure it doesn't go out. Right. I don't know what happens there.
I don't either. All I know is the celibacy thing. I tried it against my will through my teens and early 20s. I was not a big fan. So
yeah, but you know that at least one of that gathering has probably broken the rule. Just law of averages.
Who am I to judge?
Indeed. The interesting thing, I'd never really thought about this in any detail. Back to the Canada thing.
Sure.
But when Trump sat there and he kind of explained it, and he did it in a very Trumpian, it's a beautiful thing. There's a line that goes across, almost a straight line. Wouldn't it be one beautiful country? Right. I thought, do you know what? It kind of would work. If I was Canadian, I'd always think I was kind of shortchanged by God in that that line was there. I could have been an American, but. Why not? Why not sell it?
I'll tell you why not.
Go on.
America doesn't want them. They're a bunch of crazy left. Are you kidding me? Have you seen what they elect in Canada? Oh my gosh, point. It's like it'd basically be adding a huge San Francisco with a Boston thrown. I don't want screw that noise. I mean, we'll take Alberta. Alberta has the last people in Canada who work with their hands, so we'll take them. That's it. I'll tell you what America wants. We want Cuba. Cuba is a nation full of people who love capitalism because they actually lived under social. Cuba is a nation full of people who elected Margaret Thatcher the first time. They saw what it was like to have the garbage in the streets and the government falling apart and taxes soaring and everything sucking, and they wanted to. So I want Cuba. Cuba will make us. Well, let's make Cuba great again. Cuba 51. That's my push.
That would work. And Carney, he took no time in going net zero bound as soon as he was in there. I mean, this was obviously this guy lived over here for about, I don't know how many years as the governor of the Bank of England.
Right.
Julia, who you've spoken to, Julia Hartley-Brewer on the mid-morning show, used to bump, her kids went to the same school as his. So they used to bump into each other at sports days and stuff. And Julia, being Julia, could never stop herself having a row with him. And their last row was in the vegetable aisle at a supermarket after the Brexit vote. And Mark Carney couldn't quite work out that people had voted for Brexit.
Look, when you're in the grocery, don't fight in the vegetable aisle because they're too handy. The next thing you know, you have a cucumber in the eye or a squash in the face. So don't do it there. Do it over in the meat aisle. It's harder to pick up the lamb chops and use them as a weapon. That's my personal experience from grocery store fighting. But, the other problem with Canada is Canada has the same problem that Europe has in the eyes of a lot of people in America, which is they're under the American military protection. And I want to say something. Canada's fought with America, in the Middle East, Iraq, Afghanistan. I'm not taking that away. And so it's not like, you stink, but it's more like a raised eyebrow of, come on, you could do more. You could be helping us push back on Putin more. You could be doing more in the NATO alliance, bringing up your spending, and that's a glance you get. And the thing that Trump leverages very much is this, and I think it's overblown with a sense of resentment inside the United States. Why do we always have to do it? To this week, in fact, tomorrow is the 80th anniversary of VE Day, and my grandfather fought in Europe, and I'm glad the war came out that way. And nobody regrets the Marshall Plan. It was one of the greatest things ever. But long ago, Europe should have stood up and said, you know what? We're grown-ups now. We're going to do our part. Instead, what did they do through the 80s, particularly after the Berlin Wall fell? What did they do? They kept saying, You keep spending, keep sending those American sailors over, soldiers over. We'll let them hang out in their bases and sell them beer and take your money, and we'll keep spending our money on free health care. And that there is some lingering resentment there. And it's not as bad with Canada, but it is part of the deal. They are under our umbrella.
Indeed. And just worth mentioning this story, Michael. I think this is fascinating. The TV show Tales from the Crypt is back. In the first episode, Joe Biden gives an interview to the BBC. Let's have a little listen to what happened when Sleepy Joe met Nick Robinson, who's the journalist concerned over there at BBC HQ, but in America. Here it is.
Should you have withdrawn earlier, given someone else a bigger chance?
I don't think it would have mattered. We left at a time when we had a good candidate. She was fully funded, and what happened was I had become what we had set out to do. No one thought we could do. And become so successful in our agenda, it was hard to say, no, I'm going to stop now. I meant what I said when I started, that I think I'm prepared to hand this to the next generation. It's a transition government. But things moved so quickly that it made it difficult to walk away.
I just can't work out, Michael, why he didn't win or continue and go on to win. It's a mystery.
You know, that last line, it was so difficult to walk away. Well, it was also difficult to walk towards, and on the left. It's just difficult for Joe Biden to perambulate anywhere. Exactly. You talk about Boris Johnson coming back. That the Democrats' nightmare is this guy coming back anywhere. Like, he gets near a microphone, they're flinging themselves at like a live hand grenade in combat. He's so bad for the brand. And just remember this. People ask, why aren't Republicans doing worse? You look at the tariff mess and you look at Trump's craziness and whatnot. And the reason why Republicans aren't doing worse is because Democrats' numbers keep going down too. Everything is good or bad by comparison. Yeah. And one of the reasons numbers are tanking is that the Democratic Party was telling American voters this time last year, in fact, 9 months ago, they were saying that guy that you just saw should be president for 4 more years. Yeah. And the left wing, our versions of the BBC, public radio, public TV, were saying, he's as sharp as a tack. We can't keep up with him. The guy he does all the New York Times crosswords with a pen. How do we do that? And so their credibility, every time he appears on TV, he just reminds people, you were lying to me the whole time. Yeah. You knew you were lying to me. You covered it up. Why should I trust you? And then you replace it with Kamala Harris, who...
well, indeed, you could only imagine what that would have. My goodness. And I do have a bit of a sympathy from Nick Robinson. He's probably not a big name over in the States, but he's a political interviewer of many, many years of some note, etc. I reckon if you spoke to him, he would probably say it was the hardest interview he's ever done, and he's done lots. You can only imagine what went on the cutting room floor, how long it took to get those answers. I'm not just trying to be mean to Joe here, but I reckon that 30 minutes probably took about 3.5 weeks.
Well, you think it was hard to record? You should try watching it. That was the tough part, man.
Absolutely right. Listen, Michael, thank you as ever. Michael Graham, he is, of course, our man on Capitol Hill, US political commentator, managing editor at Inside Sources. Thank you to him. Back to you in a couple of moments' time. We've got loads of comment on this. Boris Johnson and Mark Carney, goodness knows what else. It's all there. Before we do, just time to tell you one more time how you can find out how you could be in with a chance to win. This is quite extraordinary as something to win. It's a weekend away in Munich at the end of May to watch the biggest game in European football. I think you can almost say global football, the Champions League final. Will Arsenal be there? We might find out tonight. Thanks to our colleagues at talkSPORT. They're also throwing in £5,000 £5,000 as well. So you go to Munich, you have the weekend at Munich, you go to see the Champions League final and they give you £5,000. That's got to be worth winning. You want to be in it to win it, as the phrase goes. Here's the detail. Have a look.
Win a once-in-a-lifetime trip to watch the Champions League final live. Go to talksport.com/win for your chance to embark on the ultimate odyssey of football ecstasy. With 2 tickets to the Champions League final live at the iconic Munich Football Arena, Germany, including flights, accommodation and an uber-massive £5,000 in your hand. How about that? Enter online now at talksport.com/win. Terms and conditions apply. Achtung, baby.
18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win that VIP trip, simply text the word football to 3338 by the 16th of May, 11 p.m. A text will cost you £2 plus one standard network rate message. You must have bill payer's permission. Or you can just send your name and number by post to Champions League Final Comp, P.O. Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. It must arrive by 5 p.m. on May the 21st.
In the view of India and Prime Minister Modi, just a few hours after signing that curious trade deal with Sir Keir Starmer, he launched this massive attack.
This is a revenge attack because they blame Pakistan.
They blame Pakistan, but in particular they blame the Pakistan intelligence services for nurturing and cherishing Islamist terrorists.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This in from Cliff, who says, had I been in the position of Mark Carney, I would have said to President Trump that Canada is bigger than the USA, has more minerals and natural resources. We were hoping, rather, that the US would become a province of Canada and thus membership of the Commonwealth. That would have been something, wouldn't it, had he responded? He must have, I bet they thought about that on the plane going down there. Must have had that chat. Jimmy's in Benidorm on this issue of Donald Trump and the Republican Party. Jimmy, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Hi, I'd just like to say that Donald Trump has grown the Republican Party in his own image with his ideas. He's got a cabinet who are fully on board with what he has got to say. The American people agree with everything that he had said. That's why he won the election by a landslide. if Nigel Farage could build a Reform Party in the same way with UK interests at heart, then it could surely go the same way if people get on board with his ideas.
There is that the difficulty. I mean, the criticism that some people make of Trump is that it's more of a cult than a party. Does that matter?
No, not really. I mean, if nearly all the American Republicans are on board with what he's saying, and there must have been to give him a landslide, he's got the House, he's got the college, he got everything. So the American people must have been on board with what he had to say.
I would imagine that's absolutely the case. Can Mr. Farage in any way capitalise on that? Can he change that?
Yeah, I think so. I think most Reform people, I'll just say now, I actually became a Reform member a couple of months ago. And I've never been part of a political party.
Yeah.
What he's got to say and his party's got to say really resonate with me. So I'm certainly on board with what I have to say, and I think a lot of the country has.
There it is, Jimmy. Thank you very much indeed. Jimmy in Benidorm speaks for, I think, many, many people.
Jimmy in Benidorm.
We've got about 15 minutes to talk before the news.
We've got enough time that
we could do a whole show here.
This is the sort of time you go round to my house 5 minutes, isn't it? I put white on in your honour today. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. Yes.
You're looking well. You're looking sprightly today.
Sprightly. I don't know. You know, there's that kind of annoyance I have with weather. I know it's irrational. I know it's very British, but I don't like it being cold when it's meant to be hot. I like it being cold in the
May.
winter.
Stop being git.
It's May, but it's nearly mid-May, and it should be a bit warmer. It shouldn't be chilly.
I have a family, well, not a family, I mean, I've got loads of families, but the in-laws, they're all obsessed with, what's it going to be like? What's the weather going to be like?
Yes.
I'm miserable when it's dark. Over the years, I've just got used to going to work in the dark and coming home in the dark.
Indeed, I love it in the winter. I love the chilliness, I love the darkness, I love the snow, the frost, all of that stuff, because it's winter.
So why aren't you happy with this?
Because it's not winter, and it's got that
So you don't know, it's in the middle. You don't know whether to wear a gilet.
I don't know whether to whip out my gilet or whip out my parka or my snorkel. I don't know what to do.
That's only at night.
That's only as I sleep.
Well, not from what I've heard. Yes, I know what you mean. It's a bit difficult to know what to wear, isn't it? What's gone today, then, dear?
What's gone? Well, we've talked about Boris Johnson.
Not a chance.
It's a very odd one, isn't it?
I'll tell you,
we didn't take a single call from anybody.
I was a massive extoller of his virtues.
Yes.
The more you dig, and the more you find out, actually, he moved the conservatism away from the very things that Reform are now talking about. He was net zero.
Yeah.
He was high taxation. He said he's dropping immigration to 20,000, and it's nearly at 1 million. So I don't think, but this is me being honest, I don't think he is the answer. Mike showed me something earlier that I thought was fascinating. They did a breakdown of the voting in those local elections last week.
Yeah.
If what happened in Runcorn was replicated, the big news story is Reform did really well, and Labour did. Do you know that if that result was replicated across the United Kingdom, Reform would have over 400 seats, the Labour Party would have 150. Do you know how many? This just came out today. Do you know how many the Tories would have?
Go on.
6. No, we're laughing. Are they politically finished? Are we now at a two-party system that doesn't involve the Tories?
But then that was a seat, wasn't it?
Gone.
The Tories have never won that seat. They've always come third.
I know.
So is that the best barometer? That's all I'm throwing up.
A very interesting word, barometer.
Is it the best? Is it the best windsock?
Do you know what I found out in the last hour? It's potentially true that both of my children will have chicken pox, which means that my holiday next week is going to have to be cancelled.
So, are they in?
See, now he's thinking. See.
Now, do you know what I was thinking? I was trying to think.
When I went round there the other day to see your wife when you were on air, have I caught chicken pox? That's what you're trying to say.
That's what I was thinking. I don't think my little one has had chicken.
Well, he's going to have it now. If you've been seeing Mrs. Carl, isn't he? That's it. That's you stuffed.
That's me stuffed as well. So what? So you think the bug is around the sort of nurseries and the schools and and the neck of the woods?
Well, we don't go to that sort of school, but yes, it's definitely. I mean, honestly,
I go to a school where you catch
things. Do you get on with your neighbours? I said it's too far to walk. I haven't met them. What are you talking about?
You can see them from the turret, though.
Well, yes, when you fire a couple of pheasants on a Sunday morning. Indeed. I said pheasants, not peasants. How do we go from Boris Johnson to peasants? But no, seriously, really interesting. For me...
You can't leave them at home, by the way.
Yes, you can. The two-tier tax rate just about sums up this government, doesn't it? Let's say to the British people, you're screwed, we're going to ruin small businesses, we're going to increase national insurance, but apparently, whilst pretending to look good by signing this trade deal with India, we're going to say to Indian workers and Indian companies, you come here, you don't have to pay any national insurance, you can have workers' rights that we're not giving to the British workers. That's not dealing with the working man and woman, is it, Keir Starmer?
Even if, look, we talked about this earlier, there's a two-tier tax, Keir. I mean, it's going to go on, that title.
Can I say tosser?
I don't think so.
Oh, well, I've done it now. You're blank. What do you... Oh, no, look at Ryan. Oh, get the button ready. I do it deliberately now. But seriously, the man is inept. I don't understand how he imagines that the British people who are struggling are going to deal with that stuff. I really don't. You stop talking.
Well, no, I was trying to consider that, because you've got people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and Daniel Hannan who are supporting this, going, this is a great trade deal.